There is a park, you know the one. A wide stretch of green with a house at its center. A snack bar nobody visits. A fountain that somehow still runs. Two groundskeepers who never quite finish their work. A gumball machine who cannot stop yelling. An immortal Yeti who has seen everything and says almost nothing about it. A lollipop-shaped man whose laughter sounds like it belongs to a child who never grew up. This is the world of Regular Show, a place where the mundane and the impossible exist side by side, where an argument about who gets the last slice of pizza can open a portal to another dimension, where death is a recurring character who shows up to collect on bets and sometimes just to hang out. For 8 seasons, from September 6, 2010 to January 16, 2017, this show aired on Cartoon Network, 244 episodes, and in every single one of them, something impossible happened. Something that bent the rules of the world just far enough that you stopped asking questions and started accepting that this is simply how things work here. But there is another version of this park, one that exists not in any episode that Cartoon Network ever aired, but in the dark corners of the internet, where people take the things they love and twist them into something unrecognizable. Where Mordecai does not just feel sad about Margaret, where Rigby does not just act out because he is immature, where Benson does not just threaten to fire people, where Pops does not just laugh. In these versions, the park is not a place where funny things happen. It is a place where terrible things happen, and the terrible things are described with a specificity that is designed to make you feel them in your body. These are the creepypastas, the lost episodes, the banned footage, the cursed files, the stories that fans wrote about Regular Show when they wanted to see what lived underneath the comedy, or when they wanted to prove that something dark had been there all along, hidden in plain sight by a network that did not want you to see it. Tonight, we are going to go through every single one of them, not to scare you, not to shock you, but to understand something about what happens when a show means so much to people that they need to imagine the worst version of it in order to process how much it meant. There is something deeply human about that impulse, and there is something deeply strange about it too. The creepypasta is not the opposite of love. It is love turned inside out. It is the fan who cared so much about Mordecai and Rigby that they needed to imagine what it would look like if everything went wrong. Not because they wanted it to go wrong, but because the possibility that it could go wrong is what made the show feel real in the first place. Welcome to Velvo. Get comfortable, settle in, turn the lights down low, pull the blankets up. This is going to take a while, and that is the point. We are going to move through these stories slowly, carefully, the way you move through a house at night when you are not sure if you heard something. And if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these long, quiet explorations of the things that shaped a generation of viewers. Let us get into it. Before we talk about any specific creepypasta, we need to talk about the genre itself, because the lost episode creepypasta is not just a type of scary story. It is a very specific response to a very specific cultural moment, and Regular Show landed right in the middle of that moment. The lost episode format has its roots in the early internet, in forums and message boards where people gathered to talk about the shows they grew up watching. The template was established by a handful of stories that became legendary in their own right. There was Dead Bart, written around 2010, which described a lost first-season episode of The Simpsons, in which Bart dies during a plane ride, and the rest of the family grieves in increasingly disturbing ways. The story worked not because the horror was particularly graphic, but because it understood the tone of The Simpsons well enough to make the deviation feel plausible. It described animation that looked slightly wrong, voice acting that sounded slightly off, details that could not possibly be real, but felt real, because the writer knew the show intimately enough to describe what a corrupted version of it would look like. Then there was Squidward's Suicide, sometimes called Red Mist, which appeared on the Creepypasta wiki and described an unaired SpongeBob SquarePants episode in which Squidward, humiliated after a failed clarinet recital, is shown sitting on his bed with hyper-realistic eyes, crying, before the episode cuts to real photographs of dead children, and then shows Squidward taking his own life with a shotgun. The story was written from the perspective of a Nickelodeon intern who watched the raw footage. It was crude, it was shocking, but it established a formula that would be repeated hundreds of times across hundreds of shows. The formula goes like this: a person with some connection to the production, an intern, a friend of the creator, a contest winner who visited the studio, describes finding footage that was never meant to be seen. The footage starts normally, but quickly deteriorates. The animation becomes more detailed, more realistic, more wrong. The characters behave in ways that contradict everything the show has established about them. Violence is described with anatomical precision. Eyes become hyper-realistic, a detail so common in the genre that it became a running joke. And at the end, the narrator is left shaken, unable to forget what they saw, sometimes implying that the footage itself is cursed, or that watching it has consequences. And then there was Candle Cove, written by Chris Straub, which took the format in a completely different direction. Instead of describing found footage, it presented itself as a forum thread in which adults reminisce about a children's show from the 1970s that may or may not have existed. The show they describe, Candle Cove, features pirates and a villain called the Skin Taker who has a cape made of children's skin. As the forum conversation progresses, the memories become more specific and more disturbing, until the final post reveals that the poster's mother told them that whenever they said they were watching Candle Cove, the television was actually showing nothing but static. Candle Cove was so effective that it was adapted into the first season of the sci-fi television series Channel Zero in 2016. It worked because it understood something fundamental about the lost episode genre. The horror is not in the gore. The horror is in the gap between what you remember and what was actually there. This is the tradition that the regular show Creepypastas emerge from, and what makes them particularly interesting is the show they are responding to. Because regular show was never a show that pretended to be safe. From its very first episode, The Power, which aired on September 6, 2010, it was a show about chaos, about things spiraling out of control, about consequences that should not be possible arising from decisions that should not matter. J.G. Quintel created the show based partly on his CalArts student film 2 in the AM PM, a short about two convenience store employees who eat acid candy and hallucinate, and those hallucinations become the characters we know, Mordecai and Benson and Pops. They are, at their origin, drug-induced visions. The show never references this directly, but it lives in the DNA of the series. The surrealism is not decoration, it is the foundation. Regular show was always willing to go dark. Characters die on screen. Not metaphorically, they die. In the Terror Tales of the Park specials, which began with Season 3, Episode 4, airing on October 10, 2011, the show created its own anthology horror format, inspired by The Simpsons' Treehouse of Horror. These episodes let the writers kill characters, turn them into monsters, trap them in supernatural scenarios. The stories were not canon, but they were rendered with the same animation, the same voice actors, the same attention to character. When Rigby gets turned into a house by a wizard in one of the Terror Tales segments, it is played for horror as much as comedy. The show understood that the line between funny and frightening is thinner than most people think. So when fans sat down to write creepypastas about regular show, they were not starting from a show that was purely innocent. They were starting from a show that already had darkness in it. A show that had already explored death, violence, existential dread, and the horror of losing the people you care about. The creepypastas did not invent the darkness. They amplified it. They removed the comedy that made the darkness bearable and left only the darkness itself. And in doing so, they revealed something about what the comedy was actually doing. It was not hiding the darkness. It was making it possible to look at the darkness without flinching. Take the comedy away, and you see what was always underneath. That is what we are going to do tonight. We are going to look at what was always underneath, story by story, creepypasta by creepypasta, from the most famous to the most obscure, from the ones that genuinely understand the show, to the ones that miss the point entirely but reveal something interesting in the missing. Let us begin with the one that most people encounter first. The creepypasta called I Can Fix This is, for many people, the gateway into regular show horror fiction. It is one of the earliest and most widely circulated creepypastas about the show, and it follows the formula almost perfectly. Almost. Because there is one thing about this story that separates it from the dozens of lost episode pastas that populated the internet in the early 2010s, and that is the relationship it chooses to destroy. The story is told from the perspective of someone who has a connection to J.G. Quintel, the creator of regular show. They are invited to a screening, a new episode, pre-editing, the kind of rough cut that outsiders never get to see. The narrator arrives, watches the episode begin normally, and then watches it go wrong. The premise is simple. Mordecai and Rigby get into a fight. That is not unusual. That happens in almost every episode. Mordecai and Rigby argue about chores, about video games, about Margaret, about whose turn it is to do something neither of them wants to do. Their friendship is built on friction. It is what makes them interesting. Two people who genuinely love each other, but who cannot stop making each other miserable. But in I Can Fix This, the fight does not resolve. It escalates. And the escalation is described with a level of physical detail that the show itself would never use. Mordecai's fist connects with Rigby's face. A tooth falls out. There is blood. Not cartoon blood. Not a red smear played for comedy. Blood that behaves the way blood actually behaves. Pooling, spreading, staining. A blue hand, Mordecai's hand, tightens around Rigby's neck, lifts him. Rigby's face hits glass. A vent panel. The sound is wrong. Not the hollow thud of cartoon violence. Something wet, something real. Think about what the story is actually doing here. It is not just making regular show violent. It is making Mordecai violent toward Rigby. Specifically, deliberately. It is taking the most important relationship in the entire show, the friendship, that is the emotional engine of 244 episodes, and it is showing you what happens when that friendship breaks, in a way that cannot be repaired. This is not a villain attacking Rigby. This is Mordecai. The person Rigby trusts more than anyone else in the world. The person who complains about Rigby constantly, but who has never, in the actual show, crossed the line into genuine cruelty. The rewritten version of I Can Fix This goes even further. In this version, the horror is not physical violence. It is emotional abandonment. Mordecai turns away from Rigby and tells him there is nothing they can do. He says, essentially, that Rigby dragged him into this. That Rigby's inability to take anything seriously has finally led to consequences that cannot be undone. And then Mordecai leaves. He walks away. And Rigby is alone. That is the horror. Not blood, not broken glass. Silence. The absence of the person who was always there. There is a reason this creepypasta resonated. It found the nerve. The central anxiety of regular show is not about monsters or supernatural threats. It is about whether Mordecai and Rigby will stay friends. Whether their dynamic, which is built on mutual frustration and mutual dependence, can survive the accumulation of small betrayals and disappointments that define any long friendship. The show always resolves this tension. Every episode ends with the friendship intact, if slightly dented. The creepypasta asks the question the show never does. What if, one day, it does not? What if the fight that breaks them is not about anything important? What if it is just another argument about a wrestling doll or a video game, and this time, something snaps? That is not a small thing. That is the entire show, inverted. And the fact that this is the story most people encounter first tells you something about what regular show meant to its audience. It was not just a funny show about two slackers at a park. It was a show about friendship, and the creepypastas understood that the scariest thing you could do to it was not add monsters. It was break the friendship. And if you have been enjoying this so far, a quick subscribe goes a long way in helping us make more of these. The friendship between Mordecai and Rigby is one target, but there is another character in regular show who the creepypastas return to again and again. And understanding why requires understanding something about what this character represents. Benson, the gumball machine, the boss who yells, the authority figure who is always one frustration away from firing everyone. In the actual show, Benson is one of the most complex characters, precisely because the show understands that he is not wrong. Mordecai and Rigby do slack off. They do cause problems. They do cost the park money and time and peace. Benson's anger is justified. What makes him interesting is that his justified anger never actually changes anything. He yells, he threatens, he sometimes fires them, and then everything resets. The cycle continues. Benson is Sisyphus with a clipboard. The creepypastas about Benson take this cycle and break it. They ask a simple question. What if Benson stops yelling and starts acting? What if the frustration that has been building for years, across hundreds of episodes, finally reaches a breaking point that does not reset? The creepypasta called Benson's Wrath, attributed to an animator named Matthew Thompson, describes a lost episode that was supposedly removed from Cartoon Network in 2012 because scenes were considered too frightening for children. The story follows the standard template. The episode begins normally. Benson is angry. Mordecai and Rigby have not done their work. He yells at them. This is familiar. This is the show you know. But then the animation changes. Benson's anger does not peak and subside the way it always does. It keeps building, and when it finally breaks, the results are not comedic. They are described with the flat, clinical detail that the lost episode genre uses to signal that something has gone wrong with the footage, something that was never meant to be seen. Benson's Revenge, another creepypasta on the Fanon wiki, takes a different approach. In this version, the narrator discovers the episode after J.G. Quintel announces that regular show has been cancelled. The narrator is sad because regular show was their favorite show, and then they see a new episode, one they have never seen before. The title reads, Regular Show, Benson's Revenge, and the excitement of finding new content curdles quickly into dread as the episode reveals what Benson does when the cameras stop rolling, when the reset does not happen, when the cycle breaks. What these stories understand, even if they do not articulate it explicitly, is that Benson is a pressure vessel. The show uses his anger as a recurring joke, a reliable source of comedy, a structural device that kicks off the plot of dozens of episodes. But underneath the comedy, there is a real dynamic being depicted. A person who has legitimate authority and legitimate grievances, who expresses those grievances loudly and consistently, and who is consistently ignored. The show treats this as funny. The creepypastas treat this as a time bomb. And the fact that both readings are available in the same character tells you something about how good the writing actually was. Benson works as comedy because the anger never has consequences. But the anger is real. The frustration is real. The feeling of being stuck in a job where nobody listens to you and nothing ever changes is real. The creepypastas simply follow that thread to its logical, horrifying conclusion. There is a version of Benson that the show never shows you directly. A version where the gumball machine is not a comedic authority figure, but a person trapped in a cycle of impotent rage, watching two employees destroy everything he tries to build, unable to actually stop them, unable to leave, unable to change anything. The creepypastas show you that version, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it in the actual show. Every time Benson yells and gets ignored, there is now a shadow behind the joke. The shadow of what happens if you push a person far enough. The shadow of what Benson might become if the show did not protect him with its comedy. That is the function of the creepypasta at its best. It does not create darkness where none existed. It reveals darkness that the comedy was managing. It shows you the thing the show was always holding at arm's length, and it asks you to look at it directly. And then it puts the comedy back in context. You laugh at Benson differently once you have read Benson's Wrath. Not less, maybe more, but differently, because now you know what the laughter is preventing. Now let us talk about Pops, because Pops is where the creepypastas get complicated. Pops Mallard is, in the world of regular show, the closest thing to pure innocence. He is a lollipop-shaped man, the son of the park's owner, Mr. Mallard, and he has the disposition of a child who never learned that the world could hurt him. He laughs at everything. He is delighted by simple things. He calls everyone good show. He does not understand cruelty, not because he chooses to ignore it, but because his mind simply does not process it as a possibility. In a show full of characters who are frustrated, angry, jealous, insecure, and afraid, Pops is none of those things. He is joy without conditions, and the show treats him with remarkable tenderness. Other characters protect Pops. They shield him from things that would confuse or hurt him. There is an unspoken agreement among the park staff that Pops is to be kept safe. The series finale, a regular epic final battle, which aired on January 16, 2017, revealed that Pops was the chosen one, the embodiment of pure good, and that he had a twin brother named Anti-Pops, who was the embodiment of pure evil. The two had been locked in a cosmic cycle, fighting each other across infinite resets of the universe. Every time they fought, the universe ended and started over. Pops broke the cycle by doing the one thing no version of him had ever done before. He hugged his brother. He chose love over combat. And then he flew into the sun, taking Anti-Pops with him. sacrificing himself so that the universe could continue without resetting. The park staff erected a memorial statue. The show ended with a montage of the characters growing older, living their lives, set to David Bowie's Heroes. Pops was gone, and it was permanent. So when the creepypastas target Pops, they are targeting innocence itself. And there are several of them. The death of Pops, on the Creepypasta Fanon wiki, describes a narrator who encounters J.G. Quintel at San Diego Comic-Con and steals a DVD labeled Regular Show, Pops Die from his backpack. When the narrator plays the DVD at home, the episode shows Mordecai and Rigby cleaning the floor when they hear Pops crying. They find him lying on the ground, covered in blood, appearing to have shot himself. The story is crude. The writing is not sophisticated. But the image it plants is effective precisely because of who Pops is. This is not a character who would do this. This is not a character who is capable of the despair required to do this. And that is the point. The gap between who Pops is and what the creepypasta describes him doing is the horror. It is not the blood. It is the impossibility. Sorry Pops is another creepypasta. This one from the James's Lost Episode Creepypastas wiki, and it approaches the character from a different angle. The episode opens with the Regular Show title card appearing without music. Just the faint clicking of the name and credits. That detail alone is more effective than all the blood in a dozen other stories. The absence of the Regular Show theme song, that jaunty, energetic burst of sound that tells you everything is going to be fine, replaced by silence, by clicking, by the sound of something mechanical running without purpose. The episode builds to a funeral scene where Pops lies in a casket with realistic, bloodshot eyes, and Mordecai stands over him, apologizing. The other characters stare at the screen with those same bloodshot eyes. Binary code appears. And then 4 minutes of nothing. Just characters staring, just silence. Think about what the writer chose to do here. They did not describe violence. They did not show Pops being hurt. They showed the aftermath, the funeral, the apology, the silence that comes after something terrible has already happened. And they made the other characters complicit in it, staring at you, the viewer, with eyes that are no longer cartoon eyes that have become real, that have crossed the boundary between the animated world and yours. That is a more sophisticated horror than most Lost Episode creepypastas attempt. It understands that the scariest thing about Pops dying is not the death itself, it is the world that remains after the death. A park without Pops's laughter. Characters who have seen something they cannot process. A show that has lost the one thing it was always trying to protect. And then there is Pops.mov, from the Spinpasta wiki, which follows the format of the .mov series of creepypastas that were popular in the early 2010s. In these stories, the narrator receives or downloads a QuickTime file, a .mov, that contains corrupted or forbidden footage. The narrator's friend Caitlin sends an email with an attachment called pops.move. The file is 15 minutes long. It opens with a blurry version of the Regular Show opening, no sound, and the title reads, Death. The first image is a close-up of Pops's face, crying. And from there, the story descends into the kind of granular, sensory horror that the .mov format specialized in. The wrongness of the animation, the wrongness of the sound, the wrongness of seeing a character you love rendered in a way that feels like a violation. What unites all the Pops creepypastas is a single impulse, the desire to see what happens when innocence does not just encounter darkness, but is consumed by it. In the actual show, Pops's sacrifice in the finale is devastating but meaningful. He dies because he chooses to. He dies to save everyone. His death has purpose and dignity, and the weight of 8 seasons of character development behind it. The creepypastas strip all of that away. They do not give Pops a meaningful death. They give him a senseless one, a violent one, a death that no one can explain or justify. And in doing so, they reveal why the show's actual handling of Pops's death was so carefully constructed. The writers understood that if you were going to take Pops away, you had to do it with extraordinary care. You had to make it mean something. Because the alternative, a Pop's death that means nothing, is too terrible to contemplate. The creepypastas contemplate it anyway, and that is why they are unsettling in a way that goes beyond gore. They show you the version of Pops's death that the writers spent 8 seasons making sure would never happen. But Pops is not the only character whose innocence becomes a target. There is Rigby. And Rigby is where these stories get genuinely interesting, because Rigby is not innocent. Rigby is, by almost any measure, the character most responsible for the chaos that defines regular show. He is lazy. He is selfish. He cheats at games. He lies. He manipulates Mordecai into doing things they both know are bad ideas. He is 23 years old and sleeps on a trampoline because he cannot be bothered to get a bed. He dropped out of high school. He once died and was brought back to life and learned almost nothing from the experience. Rigby is not a character who inspires the protective instinct that Pops does. He inspires something more complicated: exasperation and affection, tangled together so tightly that you cannot separate them. And yet the creepypastas about Rigby are some of the most disturbing in the entire collection. Something's Wrong with Rigby, from the Lost Episode Creepypasta Wiki, opens on what seems like a perfectly normal morning at the park. The birds are singing. The sun is shining. Mordecai wakes up at 9:34 and goes downstairs to play video games. Rigby is still asleep on his trampoline. This is the show you know. This is the rhythm you have watched hundreds of times. Morning at the park. Mordecai and Rigby waking up. The day beginning. But something is different. The title tells you something is different, and the story uses that gap between what you expect and what is coming to build a slow, mounting dread that is more effective than any jump scare. Benson storms in, furious about trash scattered around the park. This is also familiar. Benson is always furious, but the way the story handles his entrance is different. He sprints into the house at full speed. That word, sprints, is doing a lot of work. Benson does not sprint. Benson storms. Benson marches. Benson throws open doors. But sprinting implies something beyond anger. It implies urgency. Something has already gone wrong, and Benson knows it, even if the narrator does not yet. When Mordecai tries to explain, Benson cuts him off. No buts. You will have to listen, or you are fired. The threat is the same one Benson always makes, but stripped of the comedic context, stripped of the background music, and the reaction shots, and the understanding that everything will be fine by the end of the episode, the threat sounds different. It sounds like a person who is genuinely afraid. The story progresses into territory that reveals something fundamentally wrong with Rigby. Not wrong in the sense that the show usually means, where Rigby has done something stupid and now the consequences are spiraling out of control. Wrong in a deeper, more permanent sense. The kind of wrong that does not get fixed by the end of 11 minutes. The kind of wrong that lives inside a person and waits. What makes this creepypasta resonate is that it takes the most familiar, most comfortable version of regular show, a normal morning at the park, and lets you feel the wrongness slowly. It does not start with blood. It does not start with hyper-realistic eyes. It starts with the birds singing and the sun shining, and everything looking exactly the way it should, and then it shifts, degree by degree, until you realize that you are watching something that should not exist. The horror is not in the destination. It is in the journey. It is in the slow, nauseating realization that the show you love has been replaced by something that looks identical but is fundamentally different. Rigby's madness, from the Creepypasta fan and wiki, takes the character in a different direction entirely. This story claims that an episode aired on Cartoon Network at 3 in the morning, a detail that recurs across dozens of creepypastas. 3 in the morning is the witching hour of lost episode fiction. It is the time when the normal schedule breaks down, when the network's control slips, when things that were never supposed to air find their way onto the screen. The episode is called Rigby's Madness, and it opens with Rigby crying on his trampoline. He is talking about a voice in his head, instincts that will not leave him alone. He says he is going crazy. This is a significant departure from the actual show. In regular show, Rigby does not cry. Not really. Not in the way this story describes. Rigby deflects. He makes jokes. He gets angry. He blames other people. He does everything in his power to avoid sitting with his own emotions, because sitting with your own emotions requires the kind of self-awareness that Rigby has spent his entire life avoiding. The show is remarkably consistent about this. Rigby's immaturity is not just a character trait. It is a defense mechanism. He cannot deal with how he feels, so he does not feel. He acts, he moves, he creates chaos because chaos is easier than silence. So when the creepypasta shows you Rigby crying, alone, on his trampoline, talking about voices and madness, it is showing you the thing Rigby has been running from. The interior life that the comedy never lets you see. And that is genuinely unsettling. Not because of what happens next, not because of the violence or the horror that the story is building toward, but because of this one image. A raccoon on a trampoline, crying, admitting that something inside him is broken. When Mordecai enters Rigby's room, the screen goes black for 10 seconds, and then Mordecai is shown in a basement, terrified, unable to move, surrounded by the bodies of Skips, Pops, Benson, and Muscle Man. The story has made its move. Rigby's madness has consequences. The voices won. The thing he was running from caught up. But the most interesting Rigby creepypasta might be Everything Ends, from the Creepypasta Fanon wiki, because it does something none of the others do. It gives Rigby a reason. In this story, Mordecai and Rigby are watching television when an advertisement for a gun shop comes on. The ad contains a subliminal message, "Kill your friends," and Rigby, who in the actual show would change the channel, or make a joke, or not even notice, hears it. The message finds something inside him that was already there, and he begins to plan. The story portrays Rigby as the main antagonist, a 23-year-old raccoon who used to be Mordecai's best friend. The phrase "used to" is doing enormous work. It implies a before and an after. A version of Rigby who was Mordecai's friend, and a version of Rigby who is something else entirely. And the catalyst is not supernatural. It is not a curse or a demon or a glitch in the animation. It is a message on a television screen that told him to do something terrible, and he did it because some part of him wanted to. This needs to be stated plainly. The creepypasta is suggesting that Rigby's chaos, his impulsiveness, his inability to think about consequences, the traits that the show plays for comedy, are not harmless. They are the preconditions for violence. The same lack of self-control that makes him funny in the actual show makes him dangerous in the creepypasta. The writers of the show always kept Rigby's chaos within bounds. The consequences of his impulsiveness were always manageable, always reversible. The creepypastas remove those bounds and show you what uncontrolled impulsiveness actually looks like when it is directed at people instead of situations. That is not the behavior of someone who is just immature. That is the behavior of someone who has never developed the internal mechanisms that prevent people from acting on their worst impulses. And the show knows this. The show has always known this. There is a reason Mordecai is always there. Not just as a friend, but as a check. As the person who says no. That is too far. We cannot do that. Without Mordecai, without that check, Rigby is not funny anymore. He is frightening. The creepypastas understand this. They remove Mordecai, either literally or emotionally, and they show you what Rigby becomes. And what he becomes is the thing the show spent 8 seasons making sure he would never become. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now we need to talk about a creepypasta that takes a completely different approach from everything we have discussed so far. We have talked about stories that target specific characters, stories that amplify the darkness already present in the show, stories that break relationships or remove the comedy that makes the violence bearable. But there is another category of regular show creepypasta that does something more structural. It does not just tell a dark story about the characters. It claims that the show itself is different from what you think it is. That the version you watched was not the real version. That the truth was hidden from you by a network, by a creator, by a system that decided you were not ready to see what was actually there. The creepypasta called You, from the James's Lost Episode Creepypastas wiki, is one of the clearest examples of this approach. The narrator is an intern at Cartoon Network Studios. They find a tape. The tape has a sticker on it, with the title written in sloppy handwriting, with what appears to be a Sharpie marker. Staff had told them the tape had been disposed of. It had not. The narrator closes the door, puts up a "Please Knock" sign, and watches. The episode plays. The title appears 3 times, which the narrator assumes is a glitch. But it is not a glitch. The title appearing 3 times is the story telling you that this episode is insistent. It wants to be seen. It has been locked away and disposed of and hidden, and it keeps coming back. 3 times, each time more deliberate than the last. The repetition is not an error, it is a demand. What follows is a story that moves beyond the episode itself and into the real world. An intern named Tom works nearby. The narrator realizes that the episode wants Tom, specifically, personally. After the viewing, Tom is gone. The tape will not play again. It keeps ejecting. And then Stuart Snyder, who was the president of Turner Broadcasting's animation division and oversaw Cartoon Network during this period, appears and tells the narrator they should not have been looking for things. Think about the layers of this story. It is not just a creepypasta about a lost episode. It is a creepypasta about the institutional power that controls what you see. Cartoon Network, in this story, is not a network that accidentally aired something disturbing. It is a network that deliberately created something dangerous, recognized what it had created, tried to destroy it, failed, and now enforces silence about its existence. The horror is not the episode. The horror is the system that produced the episode and then pretended it did not exist. The show you love was made by people who are capable of making something you would not love, something that would hurt you, and they chose not to show it to you. But the choice not to show it does not mean it does not exist. This is a fundamentally different kind of horror from the blood and violence stories. This is institutional horror. Conspiracy horror. The fear that the things you consume, the shows you watch, the media you trust, are curated versions of something darker. That somewhere, in a basement, or a vault, or a filing cabinet with a please knock sign on the door, there is a version of your childhood that would destroy the memories you built around it. You cannot verify that this version does not exist. That is the genius of the format. It is unfalsifiable. You can say this is not real, but you cannot prove that it is not real, because the whole premise is that it was hidden, and the fact that you have never seen it is not evidence that it does not exist. It is evidence that the hiding worked. The creepypasta called Never Never operates in similar territory, though with different mechanics. The title card reads Never, Never, but the information bar indicates the episode is Death Punchies, which is the title of an actual regular show episode from Season 1, Episode 4, which aired on September 27, 2010. This is a subtle and effective detail. By naming a real episode but showing something different, the story suggests that the episode you watched under the title Death Punchies was not the only version. There was another Death Punchies. A Death Punchies that someone decided you should never see. Never. Never. The episode shows Mordecai and Rigby in the woods. It is raining. This is already wrong. Regular show does not often put its characters in the woods in the rain, with no comedic setup, no reason, no inciting incident. The woods are not the park. The park is safe. The park is home. The woods are where things go when they leave the safety of the familiar. And the rain is not the cartoony rain of a show that uses weather as a visual gag. It is atmospheric. It is heavy. It is the kind of rain that makes you feel cold even when you are watching a screen. What the story does with this setting, with the woods and the rain, and the title that says Never Twice, is create an atmosphere that the actual show deliberately avoids. Regular show is set in a park, a place of recreation, a place that exists to be pleasant. Even when terrible things happen, they happen in a context of pleasantness. The park is always there. The house is always there. The snack bar and the fountain and the cart and the dome. These are anchors. The creepypasta removes the anchors and puts the characters somewhere they do not belong, somewhere with no safety, no familiarity, no comedic infrastructure to catch them when they fall. That removal is the horror, not what happens in the woods. The fact that they are in the woods at all. The fact that the show has been stripped of the setting that makes it feel like a show, and placed in a setting that makes it feel like something else entirely, something raw. Something without the frame that tells you this is entertainment. Without the frame, the characters are just people, and people in the woods in the rain, with a title that says Never Twice, are people who are in trouble. There is a pattern emerging across these stories, and it is time to name it. The most effective regular show creepypastas do not add horror to the show. They subtract comedy from it. They take the same characters, the same relationships, the same dynamics, and they remove the mechanisms that make those dynamics bearable. The comedy in regular show is not decoration. It is structural. It is load-bearing. It holds up the entire edifice of the show. The relationships between the characters are intense. Mordecai and Rigby's friendship is codependent and fraught. Benson's anger is real and justified and impotent. Pops' innocence is fragile and constantly under threat. Skip's immortality means he has watched everyone he has ever loved die. These are not light dynamics. These are the dynamics of tragedy. The comedy is what prevents them from being tragedy. And the creepypastas, the best ones, understand this. They do not write new stories. They write the same stories with the comedy removed. And what remains is devastating. This is why the regular show creepypastas feel different from creepypastas about other shows. A SpongeBob creepypasta has to work hard to make SpongeBob dark, because SpongeBob is fundamentally absurdist. The darkness has to be imported. A regular show creepypasta does not have to import anything. The darkness is already there. It just has to be revealed. And that is what makes these stories, even the badly written ones, even the ones with hyper-realistic eyes and blood that is described with adolescent enthusiasm, feel like they are touching something real. They are not inventing a dark version of regular show. They are uncovering one. Let us stay with this idea for a while, because it opens a door into the next set of creepypastas, the ones that deal not with individual characters, but with the show's relationship to death itself. Regular show has always had an unusual relationship with death. Death, in the show, is literally a character. He appears as a figure in a dark robe, voiced by Julian Holloway. He shows up to make deals, to collect souls, to play games with stakes that are genuinely lethal. In the episode Over the Top, which is Season 2, Episode 21, Skips accidentally kills Rigby during an arm wrestling match, and the episode does not play this as a joke. Rigby is dead. Actually dead. Skips has to challenge death himself to a game to win Rigby's life back. The show takes death seriously enough to build entire episodes around it, but it always finds a way to reverse it, to undo it, to restore the status quo. Death in regular show is real but temporary, consequential but reversible. The creepypastas take this relationship and make it permanent. They ask the question that the show structure prevents the show from asking. What if death is not reversible? What if someone dies and stays dead? What if the cosmic mechanisms that have always protected these characters simply stop working? Mordecai's suicide is perhaps the most direct engagement with this question, and it is also one of the most widely read regular show creepypastas. There are multiple versions of this story circulating across different wikis, and the differences between the versions are themselves revealing. In one version, the catalyst is Margaret. Mordecai sees Margaret kissing someone. The story specifies that this person was supposedly her cousin, a detail that adds a layer of confusion and humiliation to the moment. Mordecai's face shows sadness, then disgust, then anger, then disappointment. 4 emotions, described in sequence, each one worse than the last. The story is not rushing. It is making you sit with each feeling as it crosses Mordecai's face. And then Rigby finds Mordecai, hanging, a rope around his neck, his wrists cut. A note that says goodbye to everyone and expresses regret. The story does not describe the death itself. It describes the discovery. The moment Rigby walks into the room and sees his best friend's body. That is the image the story wants you to carry. Not Mordecai dying, Rigby finding him. In the context of the actual show, Mordecai's relationship with Margaret is one of the longest-running emotional threads. It begins in Season 1, with Mordecai's crush on Margaret, the Robin who works at the coffee shop. Caffeinated Concert Tickets, Season 1, Episode 3, airing on September 20th, 2010, establishes Mordecai's feelings for Margaret, and those feelings persist across multiple seasons. In Bad Kiss, the Season 3 finale, airing on September 3rd, 2012, Mordecai and Margaret finally share their first kiss, but it goes wrong because of Mordecai's bad breath. In Stake Me Amadeus, in Season 4, Margaret tearfully tells Mordecai she cannot be his girlfriend because she is leaving for college. The relationship is defined by longing, by almost, by not quite. Mordecai loves Margaret and cannot have her. He can almost have her. He can have her for a moment and then lose her. This is the emotional texture of the relationship across 4 seasons of television. The creepypasta takes this texture and pulls it to its breaking point. It says that Mordecai's longing for Margaret is not just sad, it is terminal. That the accumulated weight of wanting something you cannot have, of being close enough to touch it and never quite reaching, can destroy a person. That is not an unreasonable reading. It is actually a fairly accurate description of how unrequited love feels at its worst. The show manages this feeling through comedy, through the next adventure, through the arrival of CJ as a new love interest, through the gradual process of Mordecai learning to move on. The creepypasta removes all of those management mechanisms and leaves Mordecai alone with the feeling, and the feeling is lethal. What the story reveals, perhaps unintentionally, is how much work the show does to keep its characters alive. Not just physically alive, emotionally alive. Every time Mordecai is devastated by Margaret, the show gives him something to do next. A crisis to manage, a friend to talk to. A new episode with a new problem that requires his attention. The machinery of episodic television is, in this light, a life support system. It keeps the characters going by constantly giving them new reasons to keep going. The creepypasta removes the machinery and shows you what happens when a character has nothing left to do. Nothing left to hope for, nothing coming next week. That is a very different show, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every time Mordecai laughs at something Rigby says, every time he gets excited about a new game or a new adventure, there is now this shadow. The knowledge that underneath the excitement, underneath the laughter, there is a person who is one bad day away from the version of himself that the creepypasta describes. The show never goes there. It never even comes close. But the creepypasta has shown you the map, and now you know the territory exists. If this is resonating with you, subscribing is the single best way to support what we do here. There is another creepypasta that deserves its own extended discussion, and that is the Exit 9B alternate ending. This story is remarkable for several reasons, not least because it is based on one of the most ambitious episodes regular show ever produced. Exit 9B is the Season 4 premiere. It aired on October 1st, 2012. It is a half-hour special, the show's second, and it is essentially regular show's version of an action movie. The plot involves Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr., the son of a previous villain, using a construction project at the park to open a portal that brings back every villain Mordecai and Rigby have ever faced. The episode is a massive callback, a celebration of the show's continuity, and it culminates in an epic battle where the park staff and their allies fight against dozens of resurrected antagonists. It is loud and chaotic and triumphant, and exactly the kind of high-stakes spectacle that the show could pull off when it wanted to. The creepypasta claims that an alternate version of this episode was created and aired on Cartoon Network Australia by, according to the story, angry fans who were upset about a controversy involving the network. The details of this framing are less important than what the alternate ending actually depicts. In this version, the epic battle goes differently. Skips's power to summon allies is disabled. Mordecai and Rigby are not able to call for backup. They fight alone, and they lose. Everything they care about is destroyed, and then the two of them are hit by an energy beam that causes them to explode into goo. The episode ends with Garrett Bobby Ferguson and his son making a toast. They talk about how Mordecai and Rigby totally deserved it. They laugh. The credits play over slow, reversed music. The Cartoon Network Studios logo shows the final frame of GBF and his son celebrating. This is a fascinatingly bleak inversion of the actual episode. Exit 9B is about the power of accumulated history. Every villain comes back, but so does every ally. The show's own continuity becomes a weapon. The relationships Mordecai and Rigby have built across 3 seasons are what save them. The message is clear. The connections you make matter. The people you help will help you. The past is not just a collection of solved problems. It is a reservoir of strength. The creepypasta reverses this message entirely. In the alternate ending, the past is not a reservoir of strength. It is a flood that drowns you. The villains come back, but the allies do not. The connections fail. The history that was supposed to save you is the thing that destroys you. And the villains do not just win. They celebrate. They mock the heroes. They laugh at the idea that Mordecai and Rigby thought they could make a difference. That is a level of cruelty that the show itself never reaches. Regular show has villains, but they are never this contemptuous. They never look directly at the audience and laugh at the idea of heroism. The creepypasta goes there because it can. Because there are no broadcast standards, no network executives, no concern for the children who might be watching. And in going there, it reveals something about what the show's restraint actually accomplishes. By never letting its villains be this cruel, the show maintains the possibility of hope. The creepypasta removes hope and shows you what regular show looks like without it. A show where bad things happen to good people, and the bad people enjoy it, and there is nothing anyone can do. The reversed music over the credits is a particularly effective detail. Music in regular show is always purposeful. The show uses its soundtrack with remarkable precision, from the montage songs to the score that underscores emotional moments. The regular show theme itself is a burst of energy, a signal that something fun is about to happen. Reversing the music is not just a creepy effect, it is a statement. The show's language has been inverted. The signals you relied on to tell you how to feel are now telling you the opposite. Joy becomes dread, triumph becomes defeat, the familiar becomes alien. Now let us talk about the Trollpastas, because they occupy a fascinating space in the regular show creepypasta ecosystem. A Trollpasta is exactly what it sounds like, a creepypasta that is deliberately bad, deliberately over the top, deliberately ridiculous. It takes the conventions of the genre, the hyper-realistic eyes, the blood, the demonic voices, the mysterious VHS tapes, and it cranks them up to absurd levels, either to parody the genre or simply to see how far the formula can be pushed before it breaks. Regular show has generated a substantial number of Trollpastas, and they are collected on the Trollpasta wiki, a sister site to the Creepypasta wiki that exists specifically for stories that are intentionally bad or parodic. The regular show Trollpastas include titles like Regular Show, Suffer, Rigby's Revenge, Regular Show, Mordecai's Revenge, The Band Episode 666, Regular Hell, and the simply titled Regular Show. Regular Show Suffer is a representative example. The narrator's cousin, who was an intern at Cartoon Network, gives them a regular show DVD case. The main menu features an image of Benson with no eyes, very few teeth, standing in front of a creature who appears to be Satan. The episode is titled Suffer, and it opens with Rigby coming out of his room with an angry look. His room has blood on the floor, intestines hung on chains, and a gray beak identical to Mordecai's. The story continues in this vein, piling horror upon horror with the breathless enthusiasm of a teenager who has just discovered that they can write anything they want and nobody can stop them. Skips is shown dead. Rigby falls into fire. A vacuum cleaner is involved somehow. This is not good writing. It is not trying to be good writing, but it is doing something interesting despite itself. By making the horror absurd, by pushing the blood and the eyes and the demonic imagery past the point of credibility, the Trollpasta inadvertently highlights what makes the serious creepypastas work. The serious creepypastas work because they understand restraint. They know that a single tooth falling out of Rigby's mouth is more disturbing than a room full of intestines, because the tooth is specific and plausible and grounded in the actual physics of the show's world. The intestines on chains are not. They belong to a different kind of story, a story that has no relationship to regular show at all, a generic horror narrative that has been draped over the show's characters like a costume. Rigby's Revenge follows a similar pattern. An odd episode airs. Something blurry is on the ground with something red on it. Rigby is evil. There is blood and dead bodies. The narrator contacts the network. The network says they did not create such content. The story hits every beat of the lost episode template with the precision of someone following a recipe, and the result is exactly as flavorless as that metaphor implies. There is no insight into Rigby, no understanding of what makes Rigby's character work, no gap between the surface and the depth. Just a character named Rigby doing bad things because the genre requires someone to do bad things. And yet these stories matter, because they exist in dialogue with the serious creepypastas. They are the background radiation of the genre, the noise that makes the signal visible. Without the Trollpastas, you might not notice what the good creepypastas are doing differently. You might not appreciate the precision of I Can Fix This, or the atmospheric restraint of Sorry Pops. The Trollpastas, by failing at everything the good creepypastas succeed at, create the contrast that makes the successes visible. Regular Hell deserves a special mention, not because it is good, but because of one specific detail. The story describes an episode that uses animation from the regular show pilot instead of the usual series animation. This is a small detail, easily overlooked in a story that also features a red devil with black horns and wings confronting Benson in hell. But it is the kind of detail that reveals the writer has at least some knowledge of the show's production history. They know that the pilot looks different from the series. They know that J.G. Quintel's early animation for regular show had a different quality, a rougher quality, closer to the CalArts student films that preceded it. And they use this knowledge, however briefly, to ground their horror in something real. The pilot animation is real, the devil is not. But by connecting the two, the story creates a moment where the real and the fictional blur, and that moment, however fleeting, is effective. Banned episode 666 takes the Trollpasta to its logical extreme, the number of the beast, the laziest possible shorthand for something evil. The story behind this title is exactly what you would expect, an episode that should not exist. Imagery that is designed to disturb, a number that tells you everything you need to know about the story's ambitions and limitations before you read a single word. And yet, even this story, even in its complete lack of subtlety, is a testament to the hold that regular show has on its audience. Someone cared enough about this show to write a story about it, even a terrible story. Someone thought about Mordecai and Rigby and Benson and the park and decided that these characters were worth building a horror story around, even a horror story that fails at every level. The love is still there. It is just buried under a mountain of hyper-realistic eyes and reversed audio and the laziest number in horror fiction. If you want more of these deep explorations, hitting subscribe lets us keep making them. There is a category of regular show creepypasta that we have not yet discussed, and it might be the most psychologically interesting of all. These are the theory pastas, the stories that do not claim to describe a lost episode or found footage, but instead propose an alternative reading of the entire show. A reading that reframes everything you have watched as something other than what it appeared to be. The most famous example in the broader creepypasta world is the Rugrats theory, which suggests that all the babies in Rugrats are dead and exist only in Angelica's imagination. The regular show theory pastas follow this template, and they reveal something profound about the show's relationship with its own surrealism. The regular show theory, which exists on the Trollpasta wiki but has circulated far beyond it, proposes that the park is not a real place. The characters are not really working at a park. They are patients in an asylum. Mordecai and Rigby are 12-year-old schizophrenics, which explains why they act immature for their age. The supernatural events that define every episode are hallucinations. The other characters, Skips, Pops, Benson, Muscle Man, High Five Ghost, are fellow patients whose quirks and abilities are symptoms of their respective conditions. The show you have been watching is not a comedy about park employees. It is a tragedy about mentally ill children who cannot distinguish between reality and fantasy. Another version of this theory proposes that the show's surrealism is the result of drug use, connecting back to J.G. Quintel's student film 2 in the AM PM, in which the characters who would become Mordecai and Benson are hallucinations caused by acid candy. In this reading, every impossible thing that happens in regular show, every portal, every monster, every cosmic battle, is a drug trip. The characters are not heroes, they are addicts, and the park is not a workplace. It is a place where people go to get high and lose themselves in fantasies of adventure and importance. A third variant suggests that Rigby is dead, that he died in a car accident when he and Mordecai were teenagers, and the entire show is Mordecai's way of processing the loss. Rigby is a ghost, not in the supernatural sense that the show sometimes employs, but in the psychological sense. A memory that Mordecai cannot let go of, a friend who is gone but who lives on in Mordecai's mind as a presence that is always there, always causing trouble, always needing to be managed. The raccoon who sleeps on a trampoline because he was never real enough to need a bed. These theories are not creepypastas in the traditional sense. They do not describe gore or violence or found footage, but they are, in their own way, more disturbing than any lost episode story, because they do not propose that something terrible happened in one episode. They propose that something terrible has been happening in every episode, every joke you laughed at, every adventure you enjoyed, every moment of friendship and warmth and comedy was actually a manifestation of mental illness, or addiction, or grief. The entire show is a lie. Not one episode, all of them. The effectiveness of these theories depends on the same quality that makes regular show such a rich source for creepypastas in general: the show's surrealism. Because here is the thing about regular show. The show never explains its own rules. It never tells you why the park is a place where magical things happen. It never provides a mechanism, no enchanted artifact, no ley line, no curse. Things just happen. A keyboard that can send people to the moon. A game that opens a portal to another dimension. A coffee that gives you superpowers. These things occur without explanation, and the show's commitment to not explaining them is one of its greatest strengths as a comedy. The lack of explanation is what makes the show feel anarchic, and free, and genuinely surprising. But that same lack of explanation is what makes the theory pastas possible. Because if the show does not explain why impossible things happen, then any explanation is theoretically valid, including the explanation that they are not happening at all, that they are hallucinations, or drug trips, or the fantasies of a grieving mind. The show's refusal to provide a canonical explanation for its own surrealism leaves a space, and the theory pastas fill that space with darkness. They are the shadow cast by the show's own creative choices. A show that explained its magic would be immune to these theories. A show that does not explain its magic is perpetually vulnerable to them. And here is where it gets truly interesting. The show's actual ending, the series finale, a regular epic final battle, provides exactly the kind of cosmic explanation that the theory pastas claim is absent. It reveals that the park's weirdness is connected to Pops's nature as the chosen one, the embodiment of pure good, locked in an eternal cycle with his twin brother Anti-Pops. The universe has been resetting, over and over, because Pops and Anti-Pops keep fighting. The surrealism of the show is, in the canonical universe, a consequence of cosmic forces that are centered on Pops. This is the explanation. This is the mechanism. And it completely undermines the theory pastas, because it provides a canonical alternative to their dark readings. But the theory pastas were written before the finale aired. They were written during the long years when the show was still running and the surrealism was still unexplained. And that matters, because the theories were not wrong, in the sense that they were reasonable interpretations of the available evidence at the time they were written. The show had not yet provided its own explanation. The space was genuinely empty. The darkness was genuinely possible. And the fact that the show eventually filled the space with a story about cosmic good and evil does not retroactively erase the years during which the space was dark. The theory pastas are a record of how the show felt before the ending gave it meaning, and how it felt was uncertain, open, possibly beautiful, possibly terrible. The theories lived in the possibility of terrible. Let us sit with this idea for a moment longer, because it connects to something fundamental about why creepypastas exist at all. They are not just horror stories. They are interpretive acts. They are fans looking at a show and saying, what if this means something different from what I thought? What if the joy is a mask? What if the comedy is a coping mechanism? What if the surrealism is not imagination but delusion? These are not questions that have answers. They are questions that have feelings. And the feeling they generate, that queasy uncertainty about whether the thing you love is what you think it is a feeling that belongs to growing up. Because growing up is, in large part, the process of re-evaluating the things you loved as a child and discovering that they are more complicated than you realized. The theory pastas are a shortcut through that process. They give you the complexity all at once, in its darkest possible form, and they let you sit with it. And sitting with it is, whether the writers intended it or not, a kind of maturation. Now, there is a character we have not discussed yet, and his absence from the creepypastas is almost as interesting as his presence would be. Skips, the immortal Yeti, the park employee who has been alive for centuries, who knows how to fix everything, who speaks in short, measured sentences, and who carries in his body the accumulated weight of more loss than any other character in the show. Skips' story is Season 5, Episode 22. It aired on April 14, 2014, as a half-hour special. It is one of the highest-rated episodes of the entire series, holding a 9.7 on IMDb, and it tells the story of how Skips became immortal and why he changed his name from Walks. The answer to both questions is the same person. Mona, Desdemona, a girl he loved in high school. They met, they fell for each other, and they started skipping everywhere together, literally skipping. The physical act of skipping, that joyful, childish way of moving, became their thing, their private language, the way they said to each other, without words, that the world was good and they were happy to be in it together. And then Mona died. She pushed Walks out of the way when the villain Clorgbane was about to kill him, and a piece of the ceiling, dislodged by the impact of Clorgbane's mace, fell on her. She died saving him, and Walks, devastated, accepted the offer of immortality from the Guardians of Eternal Youth and changed his name. He became Skips. Every step he takes, every time he moves across the park, he is skipping. He is doing the thing he used to do with Mona. He turned their private joy into the way he moves through the world, forever, so that every moment of his eternal life contains a reference to the person he lost. He never stops mourning. He never stops remembering. He just keeps skipping. This is, quietly, one of the most devastating character backstories in any animated show. And the creepypastas, remarkably, mostly leave it alone. There are no widely circulated creepypastas about Skips. No lost episodes where Skips loses control. No found footage of Skips' dark side. And the reason, I think, is that the show already went there. The show already showed you the worst thing that could happen to Skips. It already showed you the loss, the grief, the eternal loneliness of a person who will live forever and watch everyone he loves die. There is nothing a creepypasta could add. The darkness is already on screen, rendered with care and nuance and genuine emotional power. You do not need a fan to write a horror story about Skips, because the show wrote one. It just had the restraint to make it beautiful instead of grotesque. This tells you something important about the relationship between creepypastas and the shows they are based on. Creepypastas fill gaps. They find the places where the show did not go dark enough, or did not go dark at all, and they fill those places with horror. But when the show has already gone to the dark place, when it has already explored the worst version of a character's story, the creepypasta has nothing to add. There is no gap to fill. Skips is proof that the most effective defense against creepypasta is honesty. If the show is willing to look at the darkness in its own characters, the fans do not need to write it themselves. Compare this to Mordecai. The show explores Mordecai's longing for Margaret, his heartbreak, his confusion, but it never explores the worst-case scenario. It never shows you what happens if the heartbreak does not resolve. It never takes Mordecai to the bottom. And so the creepypastas take him there. Mordecai's suicide exists because the show left a gap, a question it was unwilling or unable to answer, and the fans answered it in the darkest way possible. Compare this to Benson. The show explores Benson's frustration, his anger, his feeling of being stuck, but it never explores what happens if Benson's frustration turns to rage. It never shows you the breaking point. It keeps Benson at a simmer, always close to boiling, but never reaching it. And so the creepypastas bring him to the boil. Benson's wrath and Benson's revenge exist because the show left a gap, and the fans filled it. Compare this to Pops. The show protects Pops. It shields him from cruelty and darkness and the full weight of the world's ugliness. And the creepypastas rip that protection away. They exist because the show created a space of safety around Pops that was so conspicuous, so deliberate, that it practically invited fans to imagine what would happen if the safety were removed. The gap theory. That is what we can call it. Creepypastas grow in the gaps between what a show depicts and what a show could depict. The larger the gap, the more creepypastas it generates. And regular show, despite its willingness to go dark in certain areas, maintains some very large gaps, some very protected spaces, some questions it absolutely refused to answer. And in those spaces, in those questions, the creepypastas flourished. If you are still with us, a subscribe really does make a difference. There is another dimension of these stories that deserves attention, and that is the physical format they describe. Because the regular show creepypastas are not just stories about episodes, they are stories about media, about VHS tapes and DVD cases, and QuickTime files, and cable broadcasts at 3 in the morning. The format of the found footage is as important as the footage itself, because the format carries its own set of meanings and anxieties. Consider the VHS tape in You, a physical object, a cassette that someone held in their hands, labeled with a Sharpie and sloppy handwriting. That is not just a plot device. It is a very specific cultural artifact. VHS tapes were the medium through which most people consumed television in the era before streaming, before DVRs, before the cloud. And VHS tapes have a quality that digital media does not. They degrade. They wear out. They accumulate noise and static with every viewing. A VHS tape that has been watched too many times starts to look wrong. The colors bleed. The tracking drifts. The image stutters and rolls. There is a word for this quality. It is called generation loss. And generation loss is exactly the kind of visual degradation that the lost episode Creepypastas describe when they talk about the animation looking different, looking wrong, looking like something that was not meant to be seen. The VHS tape is also a container that can be lost. That is the crucial difference between physical media and digital media. A digital file exists on a server. It can be copied infinitely. It does not degrade. It does not get lost behind a couch, or thrown away during a move, or buried in a box in a storage unit. A VHS tape can. A VHS tape can genuinely be lost. And a lost VHS tape, once lost, might contain anything. You cannot check. You cannot stream it. You cannot look it up online. It is gone, and whatever was on it is gone with it. And the only thing that remains is the memory of what was on it. And memory is unreliable. An unreliable memory is the fertile soil in which creepypastas grow. The DVD case in Suffer, the narrator's cousin, the Cartoon Network intern, gives them a regular showcase. Not a download, not a link, a physical case. Something that was handed from one person to another. Something that implies proximity to the production. The main menu of the DVD shows Benson with no eyes and very few teeth, standing in front of Satan. That main menu is a threshold. It is the moment where the familiar format of a DVD menu, something you have navigated 1,000 times, becomes the entrance to something that does not belong in that format. DVD menus are supposed to be pleasant. They are supposed to have music and animation and options. This one has Benson with no eyes. The format has been corrupted. The container has been compromised. What follows, the story implies, is not a regular show episode. It is something that used the format of a regular show episode to gain entry to your television, your home, your mind. The QuickTime file in pops.mov, a.mov file, an Apple Media format, something you download and open on your computer, something that arrives in your email from a friend at an unusual hour. The narrator's friend Caitlin sends the file late at night, which is unusual because Caitlin is normally asleep at that hour. The deviation from normal behavior is the first signal that something is wrong. And then the file itself, 15 minutes long, a blurry opening, no sound, a title that reads death. The format of the .mov file carries specific connotations. It is a file that plays on a computer, which means it is a file you watch alone, not on a television in a living room, not in a theater with other people, on a computer screen, in a bedroom, late at night, by yourself. The isolation is part of the horror. There is no one else watching, no one to turn to and say, "Are you seeing this?" No one to confirm that what you are seeing is real, or to reassure you that it is not. And then there is the cable broadcast, the episodes that air at 3 in the morning, unannounced, unlisted in the programming guide. Rigby's Madness airs at 3 in the morning. Maniac Mordecai airs at 3 in the morning. These are not scheduled broadcasts. They are intrusions. They appear in the dead zone of the schedule, the hours when the network is supposed to be airing infomercials or test patterns or nothing at all. And the fact that they air at these hours implies that someone, or something, has hijacked the broadcast, that the normal systems of control, the scheduling software, the network executives, the broadcast engineers, have failed or been bypassed. The show is broadcasting itself. It has escaped its container. It is reaching through the television into your home at an hour when you are at your most vulnerable, your most alone, your most susceptible to believing what you see. Each of these formats represents a different era of media consumption and a different relationship between the viewer and the content. The VHS tape is the era of physical scarcity. The DVD case is the era of home collections. The QuickTime file is the era of file sharing. The late-night broadcast is the era of cable television's dominance. and each one carries a different flavor of anxiety. The anxiety of the VHS era is about what was recorded over, what was taped at 3 in the morning and left on the cassette by accident. The anxiety of the DVD era is about what is hidden in the special features, the extra content that the studio included for reasons that are not immediately clear. The anxiety of the file-sharing era is about what you downloaded, what arrived on your hard drive disguised as something else. The anxiety of the cable era is about what was broadcast without your knowledge or consent. The creepypastas are not just horror stories about regular show. They are horror stories about watching regular show, about the act of consuming media, about the trust you place in a network, a creator, a format, when you sit down and press play. Every time you watch a show, you are trusting that the people who made it did not hide something terrible inside it. You are trusting that what you see is what they intended you to see. You are trusting the container. The creepypastas break that trust. They tell you that the container was compromised, that something got in, that the show you love was not just a show. It was a delivery mechanism for something you never consented to watch. And that anxiety, the anxiety of the compromised container, is deeply real and deeply modern. It is the anxiety of living in a world where the media you consume is produced by systems so large and so complex that you cannot possibly verify what they are actually delivering to your screen. Let us move now to a creepypasta that combines several of the threads we have been following. Maniac Mordecai. This story, published on fanfiction.net, is one of the few regular show creepypastas that exists as formal fanfiction rather than a wiki entry or a forum post. It is rated Fiction M. It contains 1,179 words, and it describes an episode that the narrator encounters while watching Cartoon Network at 3 in the morning. Poor sound quality. The title Maniac Mordecai. The episode opens with a familiar premise. Benson assigns Mordecai and Rigby to set up tents for special guests. If the work is not done, they are fired. This is the engine of countless regular show episodes. Benson gives an order. Mordecai and Rigby do not follow it. Chaos ensues. But in this story, the chaos is not supernatural. It is personal. Mordecai and Rigby take the golf cart for a joyride instead of doing their work. Benson catches them. His gumballs turn red, which is a detail from the actual show where Benson's body, being a gumball machine, visually reflects his emotional state. When he is calm, the gumballs are their normal colors. When he is furious, they turn red. The story gets this detail right, which means the writer has watched the show carefully enough to notice it. And then Mordecai grabs Benson by the neck, pins him to the grass, and smashes him with a hammer. The glass in Benson's head shatters. Sit with that for a moment. A hammer, glass shattering, the gumballs spilling out onto the grass. Benson is a gumball machine. His head is glass. The show uses this fact for comedy, for visual gags, for the way his anger is literally visible inside him. The creepypasta uses this fact for horror. The same physical characteristic that makes Benson funny, that makes him visually unique, that makes him Benson, is the characteristic that makes his death visceral and specific. He does not just die, he shatters. His insides spill out. The gumballs that were always visible inside him, that were part of what made him recognizable, become debris. The thing that defined him is the thing that destroys him. This is the gap again. The show put a glass head on a character and used it for comedy. The creepypasta looked at that glass head and saw vulnerability, fragility, a surface that was always one impact away from breaking, and it swung the hammer. The same detail. Two completely different readings. One is a joke, one is a murder, and both are available in the same character design. That is the dual nature of regular shows' visual language. The things that make the characters funny are often the same things that make them vulnerable. Rigby sleeps on a trampoline, which is funny, and also means he does not have the stability or comfort of a real bed. Pops has the disposition of a child, which is endearing, and also means he has no defenses. Benson is a glass machine, which is visually distinctive, and also means he can be shattered. The creepypastas do not invent vulnerability, they find it in the design. Now let us talk about the Mordecai's Coma creepypasta, from the Creepypasta Fanon Wiki, because it does something structurally unusual. It does not open with violence. It does not open with blood, or darkness, or hyper-realistic eyes. It opens with Mordecai resting on the living room sofa with a controller in his hand, while Rigby snores with an empty bag of chips on his chest. The television hums. This is the most ordinary scene in regular show. Two friends, after a long day, falling asleep in front of the TV. It is the visual equivalent of comfort food. It is the scene that tells you everything is fine, nothing is happening, the world is at rest. And then the television's hum grows sharper. The volume seems to increase on its own. Mordecai looks at the screen, static. He tries to wake Rigby. Rigby's body slumps to the side, motionless. Mordecai runs outside, panicked, and when he returns to the house, Rigby is no longer on the sofa. That is all. That is the opening. There is no blood. There is no violence. There is only the most familiar scene in the show. The two friends in the living room, slowly becoming unfamiliar. The television that was playing something is now playing nothing. The friend who was snoring is now silent. And then the friend is gone. Not dead. Not attacked. Just gone. Absent. Removed from the scene without explanation. This is a different kind of horror from anything else we have discussed. It is the horror of subtraction. The horror of coming home and finding the house empty when it should not be. The horror of reaching for something that was there a moment ago and finding only space. It is not violent. It is not gory. It is lonely. And loneliness, in the context of regular show, is the thing the show works hardest to prevent. The whole structure of the show, the park, the house, the ensemble cast, the recurring adventures, exists to ensure that these characters are never alone. They always have each other. They always have somewhere to go, and someone to go there with. The Creepypasta removes all of that. It leaves Mordecai in an empty house with a screen full of static, and it asks you to feel what that feels like. To feel the weight of a world where Rigby is not there, where the couch is empty, where the only sound is the hum of a television that is showing you nothing. Subscribing helps us keep these late-night explorations going, and we appreciate every single one. We have covered a lot of ground, and we are going to keep going, because there is more to see in these stories than a single pass can reveal. Let us talk about the Liar Creepypasta from the Creepypasta Fanon Wiki, because it introduces a dynamic that none of the other stories quite capture. In this story, Mordecai is depressed while Rigby is furious. Those two emotional states, side by side, are significant. In the actual show, Mordecai and Rigby tend to mirror each other emotionally. When one is excited, the other is excited. When one is scared, the other is scared. They are an emotional unit. The Creepypasta separates them. One is depressed, the other is furious. They are no longer in sync. The emotional bond that connects them has been severed, and they are each alone with their own feelings for what might be the first time in the entire run of the show. Benson appears and says they do not seem to be working hard enough. This is Benson's default state. But in the context of two characters who are each drowning in their own unspoken distress, Benson's complaint about work ethic feels different. It feels tone-deaf, oblivious. Benson is standing in front of two people who are in crisis, and he is talking about productivity. And that is not a failure of Benson's character. That is a remarkably accurate depiction of how workplaces actually function. People are falling apart, and the system keeps asking them to meet deadlines. Then Pops runs in, fast, as if something bad has happened, and he falls down the stairs. Breaks his arm. Pops, the character the show protects above all others, the character whose innocence is guarded by every other character in the cast, is hurt. And the story describes it happening suddenly, without warning, without the narrative preparation that the show would normally provide. In the show, when something bad is about to happen, there are signals, music cues, camera angles. The rhythm of the scene shifts. The Creepypasta strips all of that away. Pops falls down the stairs and breaks his arm, and it happens the way things actually happen. Without warning, without music, without a frame. And then Mordecai and Rigby start to fight. But the fighting is realistic, not cartoonish. That word, realistic, is the Creepypasta's most powerful tool. In the actual show, when Mordecai and Rigby fight, it is stylized, dust clouds, exaggerated movements, sound effects that are more comedic than violent. The Creepypasta removes the stylization. It shows you what a fight between two people actually looks like. The awkwardness, the ugliness, the way bodies actually move when they are trying to hurt each other. And the contrast between the cartoon version and the realistic version is the analysis. You do not need a narrator to tell you what this means. The contrast tells you. It tells you that the cartoon version was always a sanitized version of something uglier, that the dust clouds were hiding something, that the sound effects were covering something up. This is the plain statement technique, applied not by an analyst, but by a creepypasta writer. Remove all comedic framing. Describe what literally happened in the flattest, most direct possible language. Two friends fighting. One depressed, one furious. A coworker falling downstairs. A boss who does not notice that everyone is falling apart. That is not a cartoon. That is a Tuesday. Now let us go deeper into the cultural context, because the regular show creepypastas did not emerge in a vacuum. They emerged alongside creepypastas for dozens of other shows. Adventure Time, My Little Pony, SpongeBob SquarePants, Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, and each show's creepypastas reflect something specific about that show and its audience. The SpongeBob creepypastas tend toward body horror, because SpongeBob's visual style, with its exaggerated faces and elastic bodies, lends itself to grotesque distortion. The My Little Pony creepypastas tend toward psychological horror, because the show's emphasis on friendship and harmony creates a tension when those values are inverted. The Gravity Falls creepypastas are relatively rare, because the show itself is a horror-adjacent mystery that already explored darkness with considerable depth. Regular Show sits in a unique position in this landscape. It is not as visually elastic as SpongeBob, so the body horror does not land as naturally. It is not as explicitly optimistic as My Little Pony, so the inversion of values is less dramatic. And it is not as self-consciously dark as Gravity Falls, so there are more gaps for creepypastas to fill. What Regular Show offers, uniquely, is a world that feels real despite being surreal. The park feels like a real place. The friendships feel like real friendships. The boredom, the frustration, the longing, the petty arguments, all of it feels like it has been observed from life, not invented for a cartoon. And when creepypasta writers encounter a world that feels real, they write stories that feel real, or at least they try to. This is why the best Regular Show creepypastas tend to be more psychologically grounded than their counterparts for other shows. I Can Fix This is about the end of a friendship. Mordecai's suicide is about depression and heartbreak. Mordecai's coma is about loneliness. Liar is about the failure of communication in a place where people are supposed to care about each other. These are not supernatural premises. These are human premises. The horror comes not from monsters or curses, but from the intensification of feelings that are already present in the show. And that intensification is what makes them effective as companion pieces to the actual series. They do not replace Regular Show. They haunt it. They sit behind it like a shadow, visible only when you look at the show from a certain angle, in a certain light. Let us talk about one more story before we begin to draw conclusions. The Massacre, from the Creepypasta Fanon Wiki, is one of the longest and most detailed Regular Show creepypastas, and it attempts something that most lost episode pastas do not. It tries to tell a complete story, not just a scene, not just an image, a full narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. The title itself is blunt, The Massacre. No ambiguity, no subtlety. This is a story about killing, and it tells you so up front. The story describes an episode in which the park becomes the site of extreme violence. The characters who have spent years being funny, being warm, being frustrating and lovable and ridiculous, are placed in a scenario where none of those qualities can protect them. The comedy does not save them. The friendship does not save them. The show's own rules do not save them. They are, for the first time, in a world that does not care about them. A world that does not have a reset button. A world where damage is permanent and loss is irreversible. What makes The Massacre notable is not its quality, which is uneven, but its ambition. Most lost episode creepypastas are short, a few hundred words, a scene, an image, a punchline of horror. The Massacre wants to be something more. It wants to be a story. It wants to earn its horror through narrative, through character, through the accumulation of detail. It does not always succeed. It sometimes falls into the traps of the genre, the hyper-realistic eyes, the unexplained blood, the moments of shock for shock's sake. But in its attempt to be more than a vignette, It reveals something about the limits and possibilities of the form. The lost episode Creepypasta is, at its core, a parasitic form. It cannot exist without the host show. It borrows characters, settings, visual language, emotional resonance, all from a show that someone else created. It is a remix, a cover version, a piece of fan art that uses horror as its medium instead of pencils or pixels. And like all parasitic forms, it is constrained by its host. It can only be as good as its understanding of the original. I Can Fix This works because the writer understood Mordecai and Rigby's friendship. Sorry Pops works because the writer understood the significance of Pops' innocence. Mordecai's coma works because the writer understood the comfort of the living room scene and knew exactly how to dismantle it. The Massacre works less well because it substitutes violence for understanding. It does not need to know the characters well because it is not interested in the characters. It is interested in what happens to them, and that is a crucial difference. The best creepypastas are about who the characters are. The worst are about what happens to the characters. Character is the territory of the show. Events are the territory of the genre. And when the genre overwhelms the show, the result is a story that could be about anyone. A story where the names Mordecai and Rigby could be swapped for any other names without changing anything important. That is the failure mode of the lost episode Creepypasta. Not too much darkness. Too little character. But character is also what makes the best creepypastas linger. And there are two more characters in the regular show ensemble that we need to examine through the lens of these stories, because their relative absence from the creepypasta canon tells us something important. Muscleman and High Five Ghost. These two are, in some ways, the most overlooked members of the park staff, both by the creepypasta community and by the show's own early seasons. Muscleman starts as the park's crude comic relief. He tells my mom jokes. He takes his shirt off and swings it over his head. He is gross and loud and seemingly one-dimensional. And High Five Ghost is, in the early seasons, essentially an accessory, a silent partner who exists to give Muscleman a high five after every joke. But the show, over its 8-season run, does something remarkable with Muscleman. It deepens him. It gives him Starla, a girlfriend who matches his energy and his crudeness and his capacity for unexpected tenderness. It shows him maturing, learning to temper his pranks, learning to consider other people's feelings. By the later seasons, Muscleman has become one of the most fully realized characters in the ensemble. His relationship with Starla, which begins in the Season 2 episode Muscle Woman, airing on April 4, 2011, is played for comedy initially, but grows into one of the show's most genuine love stories. He proposes. They get married. His growth is real and earned, and gradual, in a way that the show rarely gets credit for. High Five Ghost, too, gets depth as the series progresses. The episode New Bro on Campus, in Season 6, reveals how Muscleman and High Five Ghost became friends in high school, and it shows that their bond is not just a running gag. It is a genuine friendship, built on shared history and mutual loyalty, and it has survived the years with a consistency that puts most of the other relationships in the show to shame. And yet there are no significant creepypastas about either of them. No lost episodes where Muscleman's crudeness becomes something dangerous. No found footage of High Five Ghost's dark past. No theories about what Muscleman is hiding behind his jokes. And the reason, I think, is twofold. First, Muscleman and High Five Ghost are not the characters that the audience projects onto. Mordecai and Rigby are the audience surrogates. They are the characters who feel the most like you, the viewer. Their anxieties are your anxieties. Their friendships feel like your friendships. Their mistakes feel like your mistakes. When a creepypasta writer sits down to write a dark version of regular show, they write about Mordecai and Rigby, because Mordecai and Rigby are the characters who live closest to the viewer's own emotional experience. Muscleman is funny, but he is not you. High Five Ghost is loyal, but he is not someone you see yourself in. Second, and this connects back to the gap theory, Muscleman's character arc actually addresses his darkness. The show does not pretend that Muscleman is simply a funny fat guy who tells jokes. It shows the insecurity beneath the bravado. It shows the fear of abandonment that drives his need for attention. It shows, in episodes like Fancy Restaurant, the anxiety he feels about not being good enough for the people he loves. The show goes to the dark places with Muscleman. Not to the darkest places, but to dark enough places that the gaps are smaller. There is less space for a creepypasta to grow. This is the pattern again. The characters the show explores most honestly are the characters the creepypastas leave alone. The characters the show protects most carefully are the characters the creepypastas target most aggressively. Protection creates gaps. Honesty fills them. If this kind of thing is what you come to the internet for, subscribing is how you make sure we keep making it. There is a dimension of the regular show creepypastas that we have been circling around without naming directly, and it is time to name it. The creepypastas are, almost universally, about control, about who controls the narrative, about who decides what you see, about the moment when the control fails and something unintended slips through. In the actual show, the narrative is controlled by the writers, by J.G. Quintel and his team. They decide what happens to Mordecai and Rigby. They decide how dark the show gets. They decide when to pull back, when to let the comedy take over, when to resolve the tension. The creepypastas imagine a world where that control is lost, where an episode exists that the writers did not control, where the characters do things that no writer would choose to show, where the show exceeds its own boundaries, not because someone decided to push them, but because something happened that made the boundaries irrelevant. This is a deeply unsettling idea, and it connects to something real about how we experience media. We trust the author. We trust that the story will go where the author intends. We trust that the writer has a plan, that the pain is purposeful, that the darkness serves the light. The creepypastas remove that trust. They present stories where no one is in control, where the pain is not purposeful, where the darkness does not serve anything. It is just there, unmanaged, uncontrolled, wild. In regular show, control is a recurring theme. Benson tries to control the park and fails. Mordecai tries to control his feelings for Margaret and fails. Rigby tries to control the consequences of his impulsiveness and fails. The supernatural events that define the show are, at their core, failures of control. Someone does something small, and the consequences spiral beyond anyone's ability to manage them. The keyboard sends Rigby to the moon. The coffee gives everyone superpowers. The video game opens a portal. Every episode is about control being lost and then, eventually, painstakingly, restored. The creepypastas are about control being lost and never restored. That is the difference. That is the whole difference. Regular show loses control and finds it again. The creepypastas lose control, and that is the end of the story. The portal does not close. The consequences do not get managed. The characters do not find a way to set things right. The control is gone, and what follows is whatever happens when there is no one guiding the narrative, no one protecting the characters, no one making sure it all works out. Think about Over the Top, Season 2, Episode 21, which aired on May 23, 2011. In this episode, Skips accidentally kills Rigby during an arm wrestling match. Rigby is dead, actually dead. The show has lost control. Something terrible has happened that was never supposed to happen. And then the show reasserts control. Skips challenges death to an arm wrestling match to win Rigby back. He wins. Rigby returns. The status quo is restored. Control is regained. The system works. Now imagine a creepypasta version of this episode. Skips kills Rigby. Skips challenges death. Skips loses. Rigby stays dead. The status quo is not restored. Control is not regained. The system does not work. What happens next? What does the park look like with a dead Rigby and a Skips who could not save him? What does Mordecai become? What does Benson say? How does Pops react? The creepypasta does not need to add any new elements. It just needs to remove the safety net. The safety net is the show's assertion of control. Remove it, and the existing elements become horror all by themselves. This is why the regular show creepypastas feel so potent despite their often mediocre execution. The raw materials are extraordinary. The characters are rich. The relationships are complex. The world is detailed and specific and emotionally resonant. All the creepypasta has to do is remove the comedy, remove the control, remove the guarantee that everything will be fine, and the show transforms. It becomes something that was always lurking inside it. Something that the comedy and the control and the guarantee were specifically designed to contain. Let us now examine a phenomenon that exists at the intersection of creepypasta and actual production history, because this intersection is where the most interesting cultural dynamics emerge. Regular Show was created by J.G. Quintel, who developed the characters and the world from his CalArts student films. The most significant of these is 2 in the AM PM, a short film from approximately 2006 about 2 convenience store employees who eat acid candy and begin to hallucinate. The hallucinations include figures that would become Mordecai, Benson, and Pops. The short was never intended for a children's audience. It includes drug use, profanity, and surreal imagery that is significantly more adult than anything in the final show. This production history is well known among Regular Show fans, and it creates a fascinating dynamic for the creepypasta genre. Because the show genuinely does have a dark origin. The characters genuinely did begin as drug-induced hallucinations in a student film. The surrealism genuinely does trace its roots to a depiction of an acid trip. This is not a creepypasta. This is real. And the fact that it is real means that the foundational premise of the lost episode genre, that there is a dark truth hidden behind the innocent surface of a children's show, is not entirely fiction when applied to Regular Show. There is a dark truth. It is just not hidden. It is documented. It is on the internet. Anyone can watch 2 in the AM PM. The creepypastas, then, are not inventing a secret origin for Regular Show. They are extending an origin that is already dark. They are asking what would happen if the darkness of 2 in the AM PM, the drugs, the hallucinations, the adult content, leaked back into the sanitized version of the world that Cartoon Network aired. What if the network's process of making the show appropriate for children was incomplete? What if some of the original darkness survived the transformation? What if Mordecai and Rigby, in their deepest selves, are still the acid-tripping convenience store employees from J.G. Quintel's student film? This question is the engine of the Regular Show theory creepypasta, and it is the reason that the theory feels different from theories about other shows. The Rugrats theory has no real-world foundation. The babies are not based on dead children. The theory is purely fictional. But the Regular Show theory, the one that says the show's events are drug-induced hallucinations, has a real-world foundation. The characters literally are, in their origin, drug-induced hallucinations. The theory is not making something up. It is connecting dots that actually exist. And the connections, while not intended by the show's creators to be drawn, are not unreasonable. They are, in fact, exactly the kind of connections that a careful viewer might make independently, without ever encountering a creepypasta. This is what separates Regular Show's relationship with its creepypastas from the relationship that most shows have with theirs. Most shows are purely innocent at their origin. The darkness has to be imported by the creepypasta writer. Regular Show is not purely innocent at its origin. The darkness is native. It was there before the show existed. It was there in J.G. Quintel's student film. It was there in the acid candy and the hallucinations and the adult content that Cartoon Network carefully pruned away to make the show suitable for broadcast. The creepypastas are not adding darkness to Regular Show. They are restoring it. They are putting back the thing that was taken out. And that is a genuinely interesting cultural phenomenon. It means that the Regular Show creepypastas are, in a sense, acts of excavation rather than acts of creation. They are digging beneath the surface of the show and finding something that was actually buried there, not by the creepypasta writer, but by the production process itself. The transition from student film to network television required the removal of darkness. The creepypastas put the darkness back. They are undoing a process of sanitization, and the fact that the sanitization was real, that it actually happened, that there genuinely is a darker version of this world that existed before the show you watched, gives the creepypastas a weight and a resonance that purely invented darkness cannot match. Now let us turn our attention back to the stories themselves, because there are a few more that deserve close reading. The Regular Show Lost episode, from the Trollpasta wiki, which is sometimes referenced simply by the wiki page title, is a short and relatively straightforward example of the form, but it contains one detail that is worth examining. The episode opens normally, with the familiar Regular Show intro, and then something goes wrong. The details vary across different tellings, but the core premise is always the same. A normal episode becomes abnormal. The familiar becomes unfamiliar. The comfortable becomes uncomfortable. This structure, the normal becoming abnormal, is the structure of the lost episode genre. It is the thing that every creepypasta in the genre, regardless of which show it is based on, relies on. And it works because it mirrors a very specific real-world experience. The experience of rewatching something you loved as a child and seeing it differently. The experience of returning to a cartoon you watched when you were 8 and noticing things you did not notice then. The violence that was always there, but that your child's mind edited out. The sadness that was always there, but that the comedy distracted you from. The complexity that was always there, but that you were not old enough to perceive. Every adult who rewatches regular show, or any show from their childhood, has a version of this experience. The show looks different now. Not because the show changed, because you changed. The creepypastas externalize this experience. They take the feeling of watching a familiar show with new eyes, and they narrativize it. They say, you are seeing something different now, because something different is there. Not because you are different, because the show is different. And this narrative, this insistence that the change is in the show rather than in the viewer, is itself a kind of horror. It is the horror of refusing to accept that you have grown up, of preferring to believe that the show was always dark, rather than accepting that your ability to perceive darkness has changed. That is a remarkably sophisticated psychological dynamic for a genre that is often dismissed as adolescent horror fiction. The lost episode creepypasta is, at its best, a meditation on the relationship between innocence and experience, between the child who watched the show and the adult who remembers it, between the version of the show that exists on screen and the version that exists in memory. The creepypasta lives in the space between these things, and its horror derives from the impossibility of ever fully bridging that space. You cannot watch the show the way you watched it when you were a child. That experience is gone. And the creepypasta, by insisting that the show was always dark, is offering you an alternative to grief. It is saying, you did not lose anything. You were deceived. The innocence was never real. And while that is a more disturbing conclusion, it is also, in its own way, more comforting. Because if the innocence was never real, then you did not lose it. You cannot lose what was never there. If you have made it this far, we would love to have you subscribe. It is what keeps these projects alive. Let us now examine the relationship between the regular show creepypastas and the show's own horror episodes, because this relationship reveals something crucial about the boundary between authorized darkness and unauthorized darkness. As we discussed earlier, regular show has its own horror tradition, the Terror Tales of the Park specials, which began in Season 3 and continued annually, are anthology episodes in which the characters tell each other scary stories. These episodes exist within the show's canon as framing devices. The characters are telling stories around a campfire or in a car on the way to a party, and the stories themselves are explicitly fictional within the show's universe. The first Terror Tales of the Park aired on October 10, 2011, as the 4th episode of Season 3. It contains 3 stories. Pops tells one about a doll that draws on people's faces. Muscle Man tells one about crashing cars into a crash pit. Rigby tells one about being turned into a house by a wizard after egging the wizard's house. The last story, Rigby's Tale, is widely considered one of the darkest moments in regular show's run. The imagery of a person being transformed into a building, losing their body, their mobility, their ability to interact with the world as a person, is genuinely unsettling despite the show's comedic framing. Terror Tales of the Park 2 followed in Season 4, and it pushed the darkness even further. Reports indicate that a much darker ending was originally planned but cut, involving paramedics and a tow truck driver revealing demonic, skeletal faces while a flaming portal opens in the road. The fact that this ending was cut is itself significant. It means the show had a threshold, a line beyond which even the Terror Tales format would not go. The writers conceived of something dark enough that they, or the network, decided it was too much. The creepypastas exist on the other side of that line. They are the versions that would never be cut. The versions with no network oversight, no broadcast standards, no threshold beyond which the darkness becomes unacceptable. And this is what makes them feel different from the Terror Tales episodes. The Terror Tales are authorized darkness. Darkness that has been approved, shaped, controlled, and integrated into the show's larger structure. The creepypastas are unauthorized darkness. Darkness that exists outside the system. Darkness that no one approved and no one shaped and no one controlled. The difference between authorized and unauthorized darkness is not just a matter of degree. It is a matter of trust. When you watch a Terror Tales episode, you trust the show. You trust that the horror will be bounded, that it will not cross certain lines, that the characters you love will be safe when the story within the story ends. The framing device guarantees this. The characters telling the stories are sitting around a campfire, and when the story is over, they are still sitting there, alive and well. The horror is contained within the frame. The creepypastas offer no such containment. There is no frame. There is no campfire. There is no guarantee that the characters will be safe when the story ends. The story might end with everyone dead. It might end with the narrator going insane. It might end with the tape ejecting and the intern disappearing, and no one ever finding out what happened. The absence of the frame is the horror, not what happens within the story. The fact that there is nothing around the story to protect you from it. This is why the creepypastas function as such effective dark mirrors of the Terror Tales episodes. The Terror Tales say, "Look how dark we can go within the rules." The creepypastas say, "Look how dark we can go without them." And the comparison reveals the rules for what they are. Not limitations, protections. The rules that govern the Terror Tales episodes are not preventing the show from being its best self. They are preventing the show from becoming something that would destroy the very thing that makes it valuable. The comedy, the warmth, the relationships, the love. The show without those protections is the creepypasta. And the creepypasta, for all its darkness, is notably lacking in the things that make regular show worth watching. There is no laughter in I Can Fix This. There is no warmth in Mordecai's suicide. There is no love in the massacre. The creepypastas have the darkness, but they do not have the light. And without the light, the darkness is just darkness. It does not illuminate anything. It does not reveal anything. It just sits there, heavy and cold and empty. That is the final paradox of the regular show creepypasta. It tries to show you the truth beneath the comedy, but the comedy is the truth. The friendship between Mordecai and Rigby is not a mask over something darker. It is the thing itself. The warmth of the park is not hiding something cold. It is the warmth itself. The show is not concealing darkness. The show is using darkness as a backdrop against which the light becomes visible. The creepypastas remove the light and say, "Look, there was darkness here all along." And they are right. There was darkness. But the darkness was never the point. The point was always the light that existed alongside it. The friendship that persisted despite the chaos. The laughter that rang out in the face of the impossible. The choice to keep going. To keep working at the park, to keep being friends, even when the universe itself seemed designed to make all of those things impossible. That is what regular show is about, not the darkness, the refusal to let the darkness win. And the creepypastas, by imagining a version of the show where the darkness does win, inadvertently prove this. They prove that without the refusal, without the resistance, without the stubborn insistence on comedy and friendship and hope, the show is nothing. Just characters in a park, dying. The creepypastas show you what regular show looks like without its soul. And in doing so, they make the soul visible. They make you appreciate what the show was actually doing. All along, in every episode, without you even noticing. It was holding back the darkness. It was keeping the light on. It was making sure that Mordecai and Rigby got up the next morning and went back to work and played another round of video games and argued about something trivial and saved the world by accident and went to bed and did it all again. That is not a small thing. That is the whole show. And the creepypastas, for all their gore and their hyper-realistic eyes and their reversed audio and their found footage, cannot touch it. They can show you the darkness. They cannot extinguish the light. Let us return to the stories one more time, because there is one more thread to follow. The relationship between the creepypastas and the show's ending. Regular show ended on January 16th, 2017, with a regular epic final battle. The finale was extraordinary. It revealed the cosmic stakes that had been building beneath the surface of the show for 8 seasons. It gave Pops a heroic death. It showed the park staff building a memorial. It flash-forwarded through the characters' future lives, showing Mordecai and Rigby growing older, getting married, having children, living the lives they earned through 8 seasons of chaos and growth. The final montage, set to David Bowie's Heroes, is one of the most emotionally powerful sequences in the history of animated television. The ending matters for the creepypastas because it closes the gaps. It answers the questions that the creepypastas were written to explore. What happens if the cycle breaks? Pops breaks it. What happens if someone dies permanently? Pops dies permanently, and it means something. What happens if the friends grow apart? They do grow apart, but they meet again 25 years later at the park, and they remember. The finale provides the answers that the creepypastas feared to imagine. And the answers are not dark, they are bittersweet. They are real. They are the kind of answers that only a show that has earned its ending can provide. After the finale aired, the rate of new regular show creepypastas slowed significantly. This is not a coincidence. The gaps had been filled, the questions had been answered, the protected spaces had been opened, on the show's own terms, with the show's own care. Pops died, but he died heroically, sacrificially, meaningfully. The friends grew apart, but they found each other again. The darkness came, but it did not win. There was nothing left for the creepypastas to say. The show had said it all, but the old creepypastas remain. They are still on the wikis, still on the forums, still on YouTube where narrators read them in dramatic voices over ambient music. They are artifacts of a specific period in the show's life, the years between the premiere and the finale, when the story was still unfinished and the ending was still unknown. They are documents of anxiety, records of what fans feared would happen when they did not yet know what would happen. And in that sense, they are valuable, not as horror stories, not as literary achievements, but as evidence of how much this show mattered to the people who watched it. A quick subscribe helps more than you might think, and we are grateful for everyone. There is one more set of stories that we need to discuss, and these are the stories that exist at the very edges of the regular show creepypasta canon. The stories that are barely remembered. The stories that were posted on obscure forums and forgotten wiki pages and DeviantArt accounts with 17 followers. The Doomsday Creepypasta, for instance, posted on DeviantArt, describes a narrator who receives an email from J.G. Quintel himself claiming he made an episode called Doomsday. The episode opens with 10 seconds of black screen, then the title card appears normally, and then the city is on fire. The sky is blood red. Credits roll. The narrator deletes the file and has nightmares about aliens. This is not a sophisticated story. It is not even a complete one. It is barely a sketch, but it exists. Someone wrote it. Someone posted it online. Someone added the regular show tags and the creepypasta tags and hit publish. And that act, the act of creating and sharing, is itself significant, because it means that even at the furthest edges of the genre, even in the most obscure corners of the internet, regular show was inspiring people to write, to create, to imagine. The irregular show Trollpasta describes episodes of a show that is explicitly not regular. The animation is described as looking like it was drawn by a 5-year-old. The characters are just outlines. The voices are robotic and high-pitched. Everything is wrong. But the wrongness is not accidental. It is systematic. The show is called irregular for a reason. It is a version of regular show that has been deliberately unmade. Every choice the actual show made, smooth animation, expressive voice acting, carefully timed comedy, has been reversed. What remains is the skeleton. The bare structure of a show, stripped of everything that makes it watchable. And that is, in its own crude way, an analytical act. The irregular show Trollpasta is asking, what is regular show without its craft, without the animation, without the voices, without the timing? The answer, as the Trollpasta demonstrates through its own failings, is nothing. Regular show without its craft is unwatchable. The show is its craft. The comedy is the writing. The emotion is the voice acting. The surrealism is the animation. Remove any of these elements and you do not have a worse version of regular show. You have no show at all. The Trollpasta, by trying to imagine regular show without its defining qualities, proves that those qualities are not separable from the show. They are the show. The regular show theory Trollpasta takes yet another approach. It does not describe a lost episode or found footage. It presents a theory, and the theory, which connects regular show to its origins in J.G. Quintel's student film, is actually the most grounded and verifiable claim in the entire regular show creepypasta canon, because the connection to 2 p.m. is not made up. It is documented. The characters really did originate as drug-induced hallucinations. The show really was developed from a film about 2 convenience store employees eating acid candy. These are facts. And the Trollpasta, by presenting them alongside more outlandish claims, inadvertently demonstrates how the creepypasta genre works. It takes a real fact, a verifiable truth, and uses it as a foundation for fiction. The fact is the anchor, the fiction is the chain, and the reader, who can verify the fact, is more likely to believe the fiction because the fact turned out to be true. This is the epistemological trick at the heart of the lost episode genre. Every good creepypasta contains at least one verifiable fact. The show really did air on that date. The creator's name really is J.G. Quintel. The network really is Cartoon Network. The character really does sleep on a trampoline. These facts create a framework of trust. And once the trust is established, the fiction slips in. The lost episode, the found tape, the banned footage. These things are fictional, but they exist within a framework of verified facts, and the framework makes them feel possible, not true. Possible and possibility. In the dark, at midnight, reading a story on your phone while everyone else is asleep is enough. This is, incidentally, one of the reasons these stories work so well as sleep content. They operate on the border between waking and dreaming. They describe a version of reality that is not quite real, but not quite impossible. They exist in the same liminal space that you inhabit as you fall asleep. The space where the rules of the waking world have begun to loosen, but have not yet fully dissolved. The creepypasta, read in the dark, is a companion to that dissolution. It says, "The world you know is not quite what you think it is," and your drifting mind, halfway to sleep, thinks, "Yes, that sounds right. That sounds like what the world feels like right now. Not quite solid, not quite certain, not quite safe." Regular show itself occupies a similar liminal space. It is not quite a children's show and not quite an adult show. It is not quite realistic and not quite fantastical. It is not quite comedy and not quite drama. It exists in the in-between, in the space where the rules are flexible, where an argument about a video game can end with a trip to the moon, where a park can be both the most boring place in the world and the most dangerous, where 2 best friends can be both completely happy and completely miserable at the same time. The show lives in the space between things, and the creepypastas live there too, between the real and the fictional, between the scary and the ridiculous, between love and fear. The banned episode Trollpasta, from the Trollpasta wiki, describes an episode where Mordecai and Rigby are watching TV when an ad for a free-for-all race appears. Everyone at the park has signed up. The race goes wrong. Mordecai's eyes become pupilless and red. He speaks in a demonic voice. He says, "I will get my revenge." The story is short and uninspired, and exactly the kind of derivative, formulaic creepypasta that the genre produces by the hundreds. But even this story, even this most basic, most uninspired entry in the regular show creepypasta canon, contains the essential elements. A familiar character doing something unfamiliar. A familiar world becoming unfamiliar. The line between the safe and the unsafe blurring, bending, breaking. The red eyes. The demonic voice. The revenge. These are cliches. They are the creepypasta equivalent of a haunted house with cobwebs and a creaky door. They are expected, predictable, almost comforting in their familiarity, and yet they persist. Story after story, creepypasta after creepypasta, the red eyes return. The demonic voice returns. The revenge is always being gotten. And the persistence of these cliches tells you something. Not about the stories, about the need. The need to see the familiar become unfamiliar. The need to watch the world you know transform into the world you fear. The need to hear a voice you trust say something terrible. The cliches are not failures of imagination. They are expressions of a need so basic, so fundamental, so universal, that the same images keep emerging, independently, from writers who have never met each other, who live in different countries, who speak different languages, who have nothing in common except a love for regular show and a need to see it in the dark. That need is what we have been exploring all night. The need to see the dark version. The need to test the boundaries. The need to push the thing you love to its breaking point and see if it survives. And regular show survived. Every creepypasta, every lost episode, every found tape, every banned footage, every theory, every trollpasta, every dark reimagining that the internet could produce, and regular show survived them all. Not because the creepypastas were weak, because the show was strong, because the friendship between Mordecai and Rigby was strong, because the warmth of the park was strong, because the comedy, the absurd, beautiful, surreal comedy that J.G. Quintel and his team built over 8 seasons and 244 episodes was strong enough to hold the darkness at bay. Nobody writes creepypastas about shows they do not care about. Nobody imagines the worst possible version of a world they are indifferent to. The creepypastas are love letters written in a language of fear. They are the sound of an audience that cared so deeply about these characters that they needed to test the boundaries of that caring. They needed to know if their love for Mordecai and Rigby and Benson and Pops and Skips and Muscleman and High Five Ghost could survive the worst possible scenarios. And the answer, every time, was yes. You can read I Can Fix This and then watch an episode of regular show and still love it. You can read Mordecai's suicide and then rewatch Bad Kiss and still feel the sweetness of that first, awkward, imperfect kiss. You can read The Massacre and then revisit Exit 9B and still cheer when the allies come through the portal to save the day. The creepypastas cannot destroy the show. They can only make you more aware of what the show was protecting. And that awareness, in the end, is a form of gratitude. Let us now take a different approach and trace the anatomy of the show itself, episode by episode, in the places where the creepypastas draw their power. Because understanding the actual episodes is essential to understanding what the creepypastas are distorting. And the best place to start is the very first episode, The Power. Season 1, Episode 1, September 6th, 2010. Written and storyboarded by J.G. Quintel himself. This episode is the template for everything that follows. Mordecai and Rigby are wrestling with a doll in their room and accidentally punch a hole in their wall. They need money to fix it. They need Benson to give them a raise. Benson will obviously not give them a raise. And then Rigby reveals that he stole a magical keyboard from a wizard who was relieving himself in a bush. Stop right there. That is the show. That is the entire show in a single setup. 2 irresponsible friends. A problem caused by recklessness. A solution that involves the supernatural. And the supernatural element entering the story through the most mundane, the most absurd, the most regular show possible channel. A wizard going to the bathroom behind a bush. Not a grand summoning ritual. Not a cosmic event. A wizard needing to pee, leaving his keyboard unattended long enough for Rigby to steal it. The keyboard can do anything. It sends skips to the moon. It makes things happen. And eventually, as it does in every episode, the power spirals beyond control, and the characters have to find a way to contain it. The episode ends with the hole in the wall still unfixed, because the solution created problems of its own, and Benson is going to find out, and there will be consequences. But those consequences will be tomorrow's problem, and tonight, Mordecai and Rigby are still friends, still at the park, still alive. Now think about a creepypasta version of this episode. The keyboard does not just send skips to the moon. The keyboard sends skips somewhere else. Somewhere that is not the moon. Somewhere that does not have a name. And skips does not come back. The keyboard's power does not spiral into chaos that can be managed. It spirals into chaos that cannot be managed. The hole in the wall does not lead to the room next door. It leads somewhere else. Somewhere dark. Somewhere that looks back. You do not even have to write this creepypasta. The architecture of the actual episode contains it. The show chooses, in every episode, to let the chaos resolve. The creepypasta chooses to let the chaos continue. That single difference, resolution versus continuation, is the hinge on which the entire genre swings. And it is why regular show is such a natural host for creepypasta fiction. Because the show's episodes are, structurally, creepypastas that have been given happy endings. Remove the happy ending, and the creepypasta writes itself. Death Punchies, Season 1, Episode 4, airing on September 27, 2010, is another example of this structural vulnerability. The episode is about Mordecai and Rigby disagreeing about who gets to be player one in a video game called Dig Champs. They play punchies to settle it. Mordecai, being bigger and stronger, always wins. Rigby, humiliated, discovers an advertisement for Death Kwon Do, a martial arts school that teaches a move powerful enough to win any fight. He trains. He returns. And the confrontation between them escalates to the point where both of them are in genuine physical danger. The show resolves this through Mordecai having an epiphany. He realizes that he has been unfair, that punchies, as a system for settling disputes, is inherently biased toward the person who is physically stronger, and that he has been using that bias to dominate his smaller, weaker friend. He throws the match. He lets Rigby win. And the resolution is not just about the game. It is about the power dynamic in their friendship. It is about Mordecai choosing to give up an advantage in order to preserve a relationship. The creepypasta Never Never, which uses the title Death Punchies in its information bar, takes this episode and removes the epiphany. Without the epiphany, what remains is a story about two friends, one of whom is always stronger, one of whom is always weaker, locked in a dynamic where one of them always wins and the other always loses. That is not a friendship. That is a hierarchy. And hierarchies, when they are not acknowledged and addressed, become abusive. The show acknowledges and addresses the hierarchy. The creepypasta does not. It shows you the hierarchy without the resolution, and what you see is ugly. Two friends who are not equals. A dynamic built on the stronger person's willingness to dominate the weaker one. A relationship that is one missed epiphany away from cruelty. Think about that for a second. The difference between the actual episode and the creepypasta is one epiphany, one moment of self-awareness, one instance of Mordecai looking at what he has been doing and choosing to stop. Remove that moment, and the friendship is not a friendship. It is a cage, and the creepypasta shows you the cage. It does not add anything, it just removes the key. Then there is It's Time, Season 2, Episode 2, airing on January 3rd, 2011. This episode contains what might be the darkest canonical moment in the show's early run. Mordecai becomes jealous when Rigby manages to get a date with Margaret. Think about that. Rigby, who does not even like Margaret romantically, who went on the date as a favor or a joke or because he could, is going out with the person Mordecai loves. And Mordecai's jealousy is not played as a minor annoyance. It is consuming. It drives him to destroy every clock in the house. It sends him and Rigby hurtling through time. It brings them before Father Time himself, who is depicted as a speaking amalgamation of different clocks wearing a bowler hat. Father Time shows Mordecai his own memories of the day, and Mordecai sees himself as he truly is. Jealous, petty, destructive, willing to sabotage his best friend's happiness because he cannot handle someone else having what he wants. And the episode gives Mordecai the space to confront this about himself, to see it, to feel the shame of it, and then to move forward. The jealousy does not disappear. The longing for Margaret does not disappear. But the willingness to let it destroy his friendship with Rigby is examined and, at least for now, set aside. A creepypasta version of this episode would not give Mordecai the space to confront himself. It would let the jealousy win. It would let the destructive impulse complete its arc, and the result would be something close to Mordecai's suicide, which is, in many ways, the ultimate creepypasta version of It's Time. Mordecai loves Margaret. Margaret is with someone else. The jealousy that the show managed through comedy and time travel and Father Time becomes, in the creepypasta, the thing that ends him. Because without the management, without the comedy, without the cosmic intervention that gives Mordecai the chance to see himself clearly, the jealousy has nowhere to go but inward. And inward is where the creepypasta takes it. Then there is Rigby's Body, Season 1, Episode 11, airing on November 15th, 2010. In this episode, Rigby eats so much junk food that his body literally separates from him. His body walks away. Rigby becomes a ghost-like consciousness, still aware, still present, but without a physical form. His body, operating independently, gets run over. When Rigby is eventually reunited with his body, he is stuck in a body cast and a wheelchair. This is regular show at its most conceptually disturbing. A person's body leaving them. The disconnect between the self and the flesh. The idea that your body is not you. that it is a thing that carries you around and can, at any moment, decide to stop. This is body horror. Not the graphic, visceral body horror of a horror film, but a quieter, more existential variety. The horror of being separated from your own physicality. The horror of being a mind without a vessel. And the show plays it for comedy. Of course it does. Rigby's body walking around on its own is funny. Rigby as a floating consciousness trying to catch it is funny. The body getting run over is played as a slapstick punchline, not as a moment of genuine trauma. But strip the comedy away. Describe what actually happens in flat, direct language. A person's body abandons them because they have treated it poorly. The body suffers injuries that the person now has to live with. The person is left broken, confined to a wheelchair, because they did not take care of the thing that was keeping them alive. That is not a cartoon plot. That is a metaphor for addiction, for self-neglect, for the slow, incremental damage that accumulates when a person refuses to take care of themselves. Rigby eats junk food until his body quits. Replace junk food with any other form of self-destruction. Alcohol, drugs, overwork, emotional suppression, and the structure of the story holds. A person abuses the thing that sustains them until the thing that sustains them gives up. And then the person is left with the consequences, alone, broken, in a wheelchair. The creepypastas about Rigby, something's wrong with Rigby, Rigby's madness, everything ends, are all, in their different ways, telling this same story. Something is wrong with Rigby. Not wrong from the outside, wrong from the inside. A voice in his head, an instinct that will not leave him alone, a willingness to do terrible things. The show manages this wrongness through comedy and friendship, and the structure of episodic television. The creepypastas let the wrongness run free, and the wrongness, unmanaged, is devastating. If any of this has been worth your time tonight, subscribing is the best way to let us know. There is one more aspect of the regular show creepypastas that we need to address, and it is the most uncomfortable one. The audience, the people who wrote these stories, the people who read them, the people who sought them out at midnight on wikis and forums and YouTube channels. Because the creepypastas are not just stories, they are artifacts of a community. They are the products of a specific time, a specific internet culture, a specific demographic of young people who were watching regular show and simultaneously discovering the creepypasta genre. The writers of these stories were, overwhelmingly, teenagers and young adults. They were the same age as the show's target audience. They were watching Mordecai and Rigby and seeing themselves, seeing their own friendships and frustrations and heartbreaks reflected back at them. And then they were going online and writing horror stories about those same characters. Not because they hated the show, because they loved it, and because they were at an age when the boundary between love and obsession, between admiration and possession, is thin and porous. The Lost Episode creepypasta is, at its core, a form of fan fiction, and fan fiction is, at its core, an act of appropriation. The fan takes the characters they love and remakes them in their own image. The romantic fan fiction makes the characters fall in love in new configurations. The adventure fan fiction puts the characters in new scenarios, and the creepypasta puts the characters in horror scenarios. Each of these acts is the same fundamental gesture. I love these characters, and I want to see what happens when I put them in a world I control. The creepypasta writer's control is total. They can make Mordecai do things J.G. Quintel would never make him do. They can make Rigby suffer in ways the show would never allow. They can break Benson. They can destroy Pops. They can make the park a place of horror instead of comedy. And this total control, this ability to do anything to characters who, in the actual show, are protected by a creator who cares about them, is intoxicating. It is the power of the author, the power to decide what happens. And for a teenager who feels powerless in their own life, powerless in school, powerless in their family, powerless in a world that does not seem to care about them, the ability to control the fate of beloved characters is a form of agency, a dark form, an uncomfortable form, but a form nonetheless. This is not a criticism of the writers. It is an observation about what the genre provides. The creepypasta gives the writer a specific kind of power, the power to make something dark, the power to take something innocent and make it disturbing. And that power, for a teenager navigating the confusing territory between childhood and adulthood, between the shows they used to watch with innocent eyes and the world they are beginning to see with adult ones, is meaningful. The creepypasta is a tool for processing the loss of innocence, a way of saying, the world is darker than I thought. Let me show you how dark. Let me take the thing that made me feel safe and show you what it looks like when the safety is removed. That is not a mature or sophisticated way of processing the loss of innocence, but it is a way. And for many young people, it was the first way. The first attempt to articulate the feeling that the world is not what they were told it was. The creepypasta is the adolescent's first essay, the first attempt to say something about something. And the fact that what they are saying is dark and violent and crude does not diminish the impulse. The impulse is real. The need to process is real. The creepypasta is just the form it takes. And then they grow up. The writers of I Can Fix This and Mordecai's Suicide and Something's Wrong with Rigby are by now adults. They may look back at these stories with embarrassment, or with nostalgia, or with indifference, but the stories remain. They are preserved on wikis and forums and YouTube channels, exactly as they were written, adolescent prose and all. They are time capsules, records of a specific moment in a specific person's life, when they needed to take a show they loved and twist it into something dark in order to understand what they were feeling. And what they were feeling, underneath the gore and the hyper-realistic eyes and the reversed audio, was this: I am growing up, and the world is not what I thought it was, and I do not know how to say that, so I will say it through the characters I know best. I will say it through Mordecai and Rigby. I will say it in the park. That is not a horror story. That is a coming-of-age story. And the regular show creepypastas, for all their darkness, are fundamentally about growing up. About the moment when the comedy stops being enough, when the happy endings stop feeling true, when the light that the show was holding starts to flicker, and you see, for the first time, the darkness that was always there. Not in the show, in you, in the world. In the gap between the show and the world, where the creepypastas live, quietly, in the dark, waiting for someone to find them and read them and feel, for a moment, less alone in their growing up. Let us talk now about one final dimension of these stories, the dimension of time. Because these creepypastas were not written all at once. They were written across a span of years, from roughly 2011 to 2017, and the stories written in different periods reflect different stages of the show's life and different concerns of its audience. The earliest regular show creepypastas, written in 2011 and 2012, are the most formulaic. They follow the Dead Bart and Squidward's suicide template closely. An intern finds a tape. The episode starts normally. The animation degrades. Blood appears. Eyes become hyper-realistic. The narrator is traumatized. These early stories, like I Can Fix This and the various Trollpastas, are primarily exercises in genre. They exist because the genre exists. Regular show was a popular show, and the lost episode creepypasta was a popular genre, and the intersection of those two popularities produced stories. The stories are not, for the most part, about regular show in any deep sense. They are about the genre, wearing regular show's characters as a costume. The middle period creepypastas, written from roughly 2013 to 2015, begin to show more engagement with the actual show. The theory pastas emerge during this period: the asylum theory, the drug trip theory, the Rigby is dead theory. These stories reflect an audience that has been watching regular show for several years and has begun to think critically about its structure and its themes. They have noticed the surrealism. They have noticed the lack of explanation. They have noticed the gap between what the show presents and what the show could mean. And they are filling those gaps with theories that, while dark, are at least in conversation with the show itself, rather than simply using its characters as props. The late period creepypastas, written from 2015 to 2017 as the show entered its final seasons, are the most emotionally complex. These stories reflect an audience that knows the show is ending, that understands that regular show will not last forever, that has begun to grieve, in advance, for the loss of a world that has meant something to them. Everything Ends, whose very title announces the theme, is one of these stories. The death of Pops, Written before the actual finale but anticipating its emotional territory, is another. These late-period creepypastas are not about gore or shock. They are about loss. They are about the feeling of watching something you love approach its end and not being able to stop it. The regular show finale, when it finally aired on January 16, 2017, confirmed some of the late-period creepypasta's fears and refuted others. Pops did die. That was a fear the creepypastas had been exploring for years, and it came true. But Pops's death was meaningful, sacrificial, heroic, exactly the kind of death that the creepypastas refused to give him. The show proved that it could go to the darkest place the creepypastas had imagined, Pops's death, and still find light there. Still find meaning, still find hope. The creepypastas imagined Pops dying senselessly. The show gave him a death that saved the universe. And the friends did grow apart. That was another fear. The fear that Mordecai and Rigby, after everything, would go their separate ways. And the show confirmed this. The finale's montage shows them living separate lives. Mordecai becomes an artist. Rigby has a family. They do not see each other every day. They are not co-workers anymore. The park is empty. But then, 25 years later, they meet again at the park. They stand together on the grass, older, changed, separate, and together. The friendship survived, not intact, not unchanged, not the way it was, but alive, still alive. The creepypastas could not imagine this ending. They could imagine death. They could imagine violence. They could imagine the friendship breaking. But they could not imagine the friendship bending without breaking. They could not imagine the characters growing apart and growing back together. They could not imagine the combination of loss and persistence, of sadness and hope, of darkness and light, that the actual show achieved in its final minutes. The creepypastas were limited by their own darkness. They could only imagine the worst. And the worst, it turned out, was not what happened. What happened was something more complicated, something sadder and more beautiful than any creepypasta could contain. That is the final lesson of the regular show creepypastas. Darkness is easy. Horror is easy. It is easy to imagine the worst thing that could happen and write it down. What is hard, what is genuinely hard, is imagining the complicated truth. The truth where people die and people live. Where friendships end and begin again. Where the light flickers but does not go out. Where the comedy carries you through the darkness without denying the darkness exists. That is what regular show achieved. That is what the creepypastas, for all their ambition and their energy and their dark creativity, could not. But they tried. And the trying matters. Every teenager who sat down at a computer and wrote a dark version of regular show was trying to understand something. Something about the show. Something about themselves. Something about the world. They did not always succeed. They often failed spectacularly. But they tried. And the attempt, however crude, however adolescent, however drenched in hyper-realistic eyes and reversed audio, was a genuine act of engagement with a show that deserved it. Regular show was a show that rewarded attention. It was a show that had depths. It was a show that cared about its characters and trusted its audience, and built a world that felt real enough to inspire both love and fear. The creepypastas are the fear, the show is the love, and together, they form a complete picture of what it meant to watch regular show in the 2010s. What it meant to grow up with Mordecai and Rigby. What it meant to love a show so much that you needed to imagine destroying it in order to understand how much it meant. We are nearing the end now, and I want to return to where we started. But before we close, there is one more thing that needs to be said, and it is perhaps the most important thing of all. The creepypastas we have discussed tonight are not, in the end, about regular show. Not really. They use regular show's characters. They use regular show's settings. They borrow regular show's visual language and emotional texture and character dynamics. But they are not about the show. They are about something that the show merely represents. They are about the experience of caring about something. The experience of loving a fictional world so much that the thought of losing it feels like a genuine threat. The experience of watching characters grow over 8 seasons and feeling, in some inexplicable way, that their growth mirrors your own. That Mordecai's struggle to figure out his love life is your struggle. That Rigby's inability to grow up is your inability. That Benson's frustration with people who will not listen is your frustration. That Pops' innocence is something you used to have and lost and miss. The creepypastas take that experience of caring and they weaponize it. They say, "You care about these characters? Good. Now watch what happens to them. Now watch the friendship break. Now watch the innocence die. Now watch the park burn." The horror is not in the burning. The horror is in the caring. If you did not care, the creepypasta would have no power. It would just be a story about fictional characters in bad situations. It is your love for the characters that makes their suffering unbearable. It is your investment in the show that makes its corruption feel like a violation. And that means the creepypastas are, ultimately, a testament to the show's success. They are proof that regular show created characters who feel real enough to mourn, a world that feels substantial enough to corrupt, relationships that feel deep enough to break. If the show had not achieved these things, the creepypastas would not exist. Or rather, they would exist, but they would not matter. Nobody would read them. Nobody would feel anything reading them. They would be words on a screen about characters nobody cared about in a world that did not feel real. But people do read them. People do feel something. People have been reading them for over a decade, and they still feel something. Because regular show was that good. Because J.G. Quintel and his team created something that lodged itself in the hearts and minds of a generation of viewers, with such force that even the darkest, most twisted reimagining of it cannot shake it loose. The creepypastas are the shadow of the show's success, and the fact that the shadow is this long, this dark, this persistent, tells you how bright the light must have been. There is a moment in the finale, the montage, the characters growing old, Mordecai at an art gallery, Rigby with his children, the park, empty, the fountain still running. And then, 25 years later, Mordecai walks up to the park and Rigby is already there. They look at each other, older, different, but still them. Still Mordecai and Rigby. Still the two friends who could not stop making each other miserable and could not stop needing each other. And in that moment, every creepypasta ever written about regular show is answered. Not with words, with a look. Two friends, standing in a park, seeing each other after 25 years, and recognizing in each other the people they used to be. No creepypasta can touch that moment. No lost episode, no found footage, no theory, no Trollpasta, no dark reimagining, no hyper-realistic eyes or reversed audio or demonic voices or blood-soaked animation can touch the simple, quiet, devastating power of two friends meeting again after a long time apart. Because that moment is real. Not real in the factual sense, real in the human sense. Real in the sense that everyone who has ever had a friend and lost them and found them again knows exactly what that moment feels like. And regular show, in its final minutes, captured it perfectly. The creepypastas tried to show you the worst version of regular show. They tried, and they sometimes succeeded, and the results were dark and disturbing and occasionally genuinely insightful about the show's themes and characters and emotional dynamics. But they could not show you the best version. The best version was already on screen. It had been on screen for 8 years, 244 episodes of two friends at a park, causing trouble, fixing trouble, growing up, staying friends. That is the best version. That is the version that matters. That is the version that will be remembered long after the last creepypasta wiki has gone offline, and the last YouTube reading has been deleted, and the last Trollpasta has been buried under a decade of newer, darker, more sophisticated horror fiction. The park will remain, the friendship will remain, the comedy will remain, the light will remain. The park, the wide stretch of green with the house at its center, the snack bar nobody visits, the fountain that somehow still runs. This is the place where everything happens. This is the place where Mordecai first used the magical keyboard and sent skips to the moon. This is the place where Rigby learned Death Kwon Do and almost destroyed his best friend. This is the place where Benson yelled and yelled and yelled, and nobody listened, and he kept coming back the next day anyway. This is the place where Pops laughed at things that were not funny and made them feel funny just by laughing. This is the place where Skips carried the memory of Mona in every step, skipping through centuries of loss, never stopping, never complaining, just moving forward with a grace that belied the weight he carried. This is the place where Muscle Man told his last "my mom" joke, and where High Five Ghost gave his last high five, and where the fountain ran and the grass grew, and the sky turned that particular shade of orange that meant the day was ending and tomorrow would bring something new and impossible, and probably dangerous, and definitely worth showing up for. This is the place that the creepypastas try to corrupt, and the show tries to protect, and the fans try to understand. And the thing about the park is that it is, in the end, just a place, a setting, a backdrop against which human stories play out. Stories about friendship and loss and growing up, and the terrifying, exhilarating experience of being alive in a world that does not make sense. The creepypastas understand this, even the bad ones, even the ones with the hyper-realistic eyes and the blood and the reversed audio. They understand that regular show is, beneath everything, a show about people, about what people do to each other, and for each other, and despite each other. About the ways love and cruelty can coexist in the same relationship, the same person, the same moment. The creepypastas take the cruelty and amplify it. The show takes the love and amplifies it. And the result is two versions of the same world. One where the worst thing that can happen does happen, and one where the worst thing that can happen is always possible but never quite arrives, because someone is always there to catch you, to fix it, to say, "I can fix this," and mean it. That is the whole story of the regular show creepypastas. Two versions of the same world, separated by a single choice. The choice to let the comedy carry you through the darkness, or to let the darkness swallow the comedy whole. The show chose the first. The creepypastas chose the second. And both choices, in their own way, tell the truth about what it means to love something that will not last forever. There is a version of this story where everything falls apart, where the creepypastas win, where the darkness swallows the comedy and the friendship breaks and the park burns, and nobody remembers what it felt like to laugh at Mordecai and Rigby doing something stupid at the worst possible moment. That version exists. It is on the wikis. It is on the forums. It is on YouTube. Read in dramatic voices over ambient static. You can find it if you look, but you do not have to look. You do not have to read the dark version, because you already know the real version, the version where the light holds. Mordecai steps out onto the grass. Rigby stops mid-sentence and turns. The park is quiet. The fountain runs. The sun is going down, and the sky is that particular shade of orange that regular show used so often. That warm amber light that makes everything look like a memory even while it is still happening. They do not say anything. They do not need to. They have been here before. They will be here again. The park holds them the way it always has, gently, without explanation, without apology, without end. Regular show ran for 8 seasons, 244 episodes. It aired from September 6th, 2010 to January 16th, 2017. It was created by J.G. Quintel, who started with a student film about acid candy in convenience stores and turned it into one of the most beloved animated shows of its generation. It was voiced by a cast that included Quintel himself as Mordecai, William Salyers as Rigby, Sam Marin as Benson and Pops and Muscle Man, Mark Hamill as Skips, and many others who brought this world to life with a commitment and a warmth that the creepypastas, for all their darkness, could never erase. These people made something real, something that mattered, something that changed the way an entire generation thought about friendship and growing up, and the possibility that the mundane world might contain, hidden just beneath its surface, something extraordinary, something impossible, something worth showing up for, every day, even when the gumball machine is yelling at you and the raccoon will not get off his trampoline, and the lollipop man is laughing at nothing, and the Yeti knows something he will not tell you, and the ghost keeps high-fiving the green guy, and the whole park is about to explode because someone pressed a button they should not have pressed. The creepypastas tried to show you a world without that warmth. They succeeded, and in succeeding, they proved that the warmth was the point all along. And here is the thing about listening to all of this while falling asleep. You are doing something that the creepypasta narrators never get to do. You are hearing the dark stories, and then drifting away from them. You are letting the words wash over you, the descriptions of lost episodes and found footage, and banned broadcasts, and cursed files, and you are not sitting at a computer screen at midnight, alone, wondering if any of it is real. You are somewhere comfortable, somewhere warm, somewhere with blankets and pillows, and the sound of this voice carrying you through the darkness and out the other side. That is what regular show does. It carries you through. It takes you into the chaos and the surrealism and the danger and the heartbreak, and it carries you through to the other side, where Mordecai and Rigby are still friends, and the park is still standing, and Benson is still yelling, and Pops is still laughing, and Skips is still skipping. The show is a vehicle. It moves through darkness, but it does not stop there. It keeps going. It always keeps going. 244 times it went into the darkness, and 244 times it came out the other side. That is not a coincidence. That is a commitment. A commitment to the idea that no matter how dark things get, there is always a way through. The Creepypastas do not believe in the way through. They believe that the darkness is the destination, that once you enter it, you do not leave, that the park burns and stays burned, that the friends die and stay dead, that the comedy stops and never starts again. And that is a valid artistic choice. It is a valid way of seeing the world, but it is not the only way, and it is not the way that regular show chose. Regular show chose the comedy, chose the friendship, chose the light, and the light, after 8 seasons and 244 episodes and a finale that broke hearts and mended them in the same breath, is still on, still shining, still warm, still there, in the park, in the house, in the snack bar nobody visits, in the fountain that somehow still runs. You can close your eyes now, if you have not already. The stories are over. The creepypastas have been told and examined and understood, and they have been placed back where they belong, in the shadows at the edges of a show that was always brighter than its shadows. The park is quiet, the fountain runs, and somewhere, in a version of this world that exists only in the space between waking and sleep, Mordecai and Rigby are sitting on the steps of the house, doing nothing, saying nothing, just being there, together, in the park, where they have always been, where they will always be. Let that carry you. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.